Chapter 86. Yawn on the bridge. White and Luo both yawned as they entered Travelers Street. The two fought until the wee hours of the morning, and barely got up at 9 in the morning. They didn't go to the cafeteria to eat, and instead went to Travelers Street. In the 4 days after Monday, they did their best to listen to classes. Finally, they each saved enough credits and wanted to pick out a costume for the masquerade party on the weekend. In fact, Victor already had a Kamen Rider suit. But first of all, the masked knight suit was too crude, so he felt that he had been tricked by Lion Sr. Secondly, he had worn a masked knight costume in his confrontation with that perverted gentleman. In order to not expose his identity, he wanted to buy a better one. I heard that the 3 princesses will join the party in disguise. Whoever gets the favor of one of the princesses will be able to dance with that princess when the clock strikes 12. Luo Boat rambled as if he had nothing to say. White's eyelids drooped. Not interested. Luo Boat asked again. Do you know about the Halloween ghost hunt? White perked up. Of course I know. It's the best chance to get a lot of credits. With credits, you can have everything. Luo Boat smiled mysteriously. Then you definitely don't know who was last year's third-year champion? White was stunned. Why specifically say third year? Wait, don't tell me that last year's third-year champion was Panduola? Luo Boat said proudly, that's right. Her name is clearly hanging in the Academy's prize showroom. How about it, are you motivated? White suddenly stood still. Luo Boat. Luo Boat. Yes. White. This year's first-year champion is ours. Then White, who was in high spirits, entered a famous velvet clothing store to make himself look more elegant. A few minutes later, they ran away. Isn't this too expensive? If we use up all our credits, how are we going to buy materials to strengthen ourselves? How about we buy some next weekend? Maybe that's a good idea. I'm a bit hungry, White. Let's go find something to eat. Thus, White and Luo Boat dejectedly walked to the street filled with restaurants. Inadvertently, the two of them passed by the Waltz Music Restaurant and saw Dark and the other two through the glass, as well as Diana and Rose's high-class ice cream. Gulp, Victor swallowed his saliva and whispered. Robert, how many credits did that chocolate strawberry honeydew melon triple cream top ice cream cost? Robert said, I think it's 19 credits, Victor. It's been 2 periods, quick. Luo Boat. Slurp, White. Let's wait until after Halloween. We'll definitely be able to afford it. Luo Boat. Actually, we can afford it now. White. Stop fooling around, we'll use the credits to buy materials. Luo Boat. Actually, I have a compromise. White Seakeet, who was leaning against a maple tree, pretended to read the newspaper. She glanced at them and sneered. One of them was the hero's son, and the other was someone she had tied up. So you're the hero's son's follower? I thought he was a person who had nothing like me, so I showed him some mercy that night. If I had known earlier. Dake was eating ice cream in small bites. He was in a good mood today. Even though it was a little different from what he had planned, he still gained something. Deanna and Luosi were eating ice cream and playing around. The corners of their mouths were gradually stained with cream. White and Luo Boat pushed open the door and entered. They ordered a 19-credit cup and 2 spoons from the counter. Dake was a little surprised to see the two of them, but he didn't pay them much attention. Dake, let's team up for Halloween. Deanna and Luosi also talked about the masquerade party. Dake was puzzled. You can team up for the event. Of course. Deanna stuck out her pink tongue and rolled up the white cream at the corner of her mouth. She whispered, I heard that senior students often do this. Teaming up can increase the efficiency of catching ghosts, and at the end of the awards, all the points will be given to one person to compete for the grade championship. Dake was stunned. Isn't that cheating? Deanna was confused. But everyone does it. Dake showed a gentle smile. Then, do you know how many grade championships have been won this way? Deanna used the handle of her spoon to support her dimples. After thinking for a while, she said, I don't think so. Dake, that's right. He lowered his head and ate a mouthful of ice cream. Then he said, this masquerade party can actually be seen as a trial. It can be used to test the results of the 2 months of school. If I team up with you, the effect of your trial will be greatly reduced. Deanna thought for a while and smiled. I'll listen to you. Around 10:30 p.m., Dake said goodbye to Deanna under her reluctant gaze. Then he walked past the brave duo and left the Waltz Music Restaurant. He was very interested in the ghost hunt on Halloween, but it was mainly for the credits. As for the grade championship, whoever wanted it could have it. A few minutes later, he walked out of the food street filled with restaurants and turned into an old and sparsely populated street. Not all areas of Traveler's Street were popular. There were always some unpopular shops that no one cared about. The shops had to do business. If no one came, they would inevitably close. He had been here before he familiarized himself with the area, but this was the first time he had taken the initiative to come here. But there was always a first time for people. After turning into the back of an old, deserted shop, Dark stopped and turned around. He silently counted in his heart, 3, 2, 1. Then a person wearing a squid leather jacket walked out from behind the wall. Dake looked at the person carefully and asked curiously, "So you followed me all the way because I like squid?" Seakeat's voice became hoarse under the filter of the leather jacket. "Damn it, it's not squid, it's squid." Dake shook his head. "We're all seafood. Who's worse than who? Let's be direct. Why did you follow me?" Seakeat: "I didn't follow you." Dake: Question mark. Seakeat: "I'm just a squid passing by." Dake: "Seakeat, you're the one collecting love divination cards?" Chapter 87. Are you talking about the flower cards? Dake reached down and a whole deck of flower cards appeared in his hand. There were a total of 18 flower cards. With a rub of his thumb, they spread out like a folding fan. Each flower card had a different design and was an excellent collector's item. Dake spoke with great familiarity. The bright red camellia represents the most modest love. The devastatingly beautiful beauty you. Even if she burns her own life, she will never leave. The red spider lily at the end of the other shore, in the unseen end, watches the sad love that will never meet again. The beauty of death in such a hopeless situation is truly poignant. And my favorite white devil's snare, with thousands of miles of love. Seeing the flower is like seeing the person. Seakeat listened with a dumbfounded expression. Although the squid skin couldn't show detailed expressions, his astonishment was expressed by the fact that he hadn't moved for a long time. This person, how much research does he have on flower cards? We are the ones who make the flower cards. Why can't I understand what he's saying? And that white devil's snare, why does it look so familiar? Isn't that the one I stuffed under someone's door? https://m, Vipcanchu. VIP Seakeat had originally come with the intention of denouncing a punitive expedition. In the last batch of flower cards distributed last week, a large portion of them hadn't been activated. This directly reduced the efficiency of the church's collection of yearning, and caused them to be unable to repair the cracked statue of the goddess. From this, the church noticed that someone was collecting a large number of flower cards. Then they associated it with the inexplicable crack on the statue of the goddess. They equated the flower card collector with the statue destroyer. Seakeat was just a pawn who came to investigate. His purpose was to investigate, and his mission was to investigate. Once it was confirmed that flower card collector was equal to statue destroyer, the church would give him the necessary punishment for the sake of the goddess. But Seakeat would never have thought that his disguise would be so clumsy. Speaking of which, who would read the newspaper on the street while leaning against a tree? Wouldn't it be better to spend some money to sit in the restaurant and spy on him? Dake had noticed his stalker not long after he sat down in the restaurant, but he deliberately kept quiet. In short, if he knew what was good for him and left, Dake would pretend that he didn't see anything. But since he didn't leave, he had to get some information out of him. In the end, before he could ask anything, the other party exposed everything with a single sentence. Dake immediately figured out the cause and effect. He even guessed that this was the squid from the Marine Order, the one who transformed Luoboat into a woman. And the reason why this squid came to find him was that his behavior of collecting flower cards was too blatant. But there was no need to hide it. Was there? He was just a pure collector of flower cards. Dake's heart was as clear as a mirror. His praise and fanaticism for the flower cards came from the bottom of his heart without any flaws. Scott had indeed felt that fanaticism, and he had believed him at the first moment. At this point, Keat could actually go back and report back. However, ever since he joined the church, some of the thoughts in his heart became harder and harder to suppress. He wanted to represent the goddess and punish this heretic. Dake said casually, "Excuse me, did you make these flower cards? If possible, I would like to collect some that are not repetitive." Keat's mouth twitched, and he didn't care about anything else. The magic summoner. Woo. Oh ye. The sudden piercing pain in his buttocks and the sharp laughter behind him caused Keat's heart to be shrouded in a haze in an instant. But in the next moment, his world became completely silent. Whether it was the sharp mocking laughter, the rustling of leaves, or even the seemingly concerned inquiry of the first-year aristocratic student in front of him, none of it entered his ears. He suddenly opened his mouth and angrily rebuked, but he still couldn't make a sound. He didn't know if he couldn't make a sound, or if he simply couldn't hear the sound he made. This was completely different from the silence card that Professor Earbook was used to using. At least the silence card didn't block one's hearing. Keat, who was filled with endless fear, finally saw the sneak attackers behind him. White and Luo boat. It's him, it's him, it's him. I remember now, it's him. I saw a small section of the octopus's tentacle before I fainted. It's the squid, Luo boat. White helplessly grabbed Luo boat's arm to prevent him from rushing up and smashing Keat's head in a fit of rage. The little fiend hiding on the eaves had already shut its mouth. It had just injected the silence potion into its syringe, and then used the small dart to throw it at Keat's buttocks, giving them a fatal blow. After the syringe had played its role, it turned into stars and disappeared. Keat didn't see the syringe, only White and Luo boat, who had just arrived at the scene. White had a naturally sharp intuition, and he had already noticed Keat's strange gaze at the Waltz restaurant. However, after eating the expensive ice cream with Luo boat, he felt that something was amiss and traced the direction Keat had disappeared in. Thus, in this small area, for people from 3 different forces gathered at the same time. Dake calmly looked at the sudden appearance of White and Luo boat. He didn't think it was a coincidence. After all, the little fiend had already seen their arrival from the roof. Therefore, this was just a foregone conclusion. For example, although White grabbed Luo boat's right hand, he couldn't grab his left hand at the same time. In the name of Luo boat Broheim, come out Ratman Cyborg. Luo boat summoned his magic guide fairy that he had created during his magic guide lesson. It was an ugly rat that stood on 2 legs and was as tall as a human. It was a remnant of the destroyed Skaven rat empire. It was a robot on the left and a human on the right. It was a Ratman cyborg with an acid spray in its hand. Luo boat don't. Seeing the Ratman cyborg summoned by Robert aiming the flamethrower at the squid's face, Victor stopped him with a terrified expression. If they allowed the Ratman cyborg to spray acid on Keat's face, they would definitely be punished or even expelled. St. Mary's clearly forbade fighting, and all disputes were advocated in the form of duels. Because of his duel with Dake last time, he had especially crammed up on the relevant school rules. Generally, the punishment for fighting wasn't heavy. At most, some points would be deducted. But if it caused an injury that was difficult to heal. However, the Ratman cyborg's acid had already corroded Keat's squid skin. Just as Luo boat wanted to take another step forward, Keat's lips suddenly moved quickly, silently casting a spell. A dark green 3-eyed squid turned solid and pounced on the Ratman cyborg at the same time. The 2 magic guide fairies tangled together. Luo boat fiercely shook off White. He clenched his fist and rushed forward, punching Keat in the mouth with all his strength. Bang! The typhoon caused a power outage for a period of time. It was a new day, a new day. Chapter 88. The punch was merciless, and almost all of the anger he had been suppressing came pouring out. Keat had never been beaten to such an extent. His mind went blank, and he couldn't use any magic cards. He screamed in pain. Robert was still unwilling to stop. He pounced forward and pushed Scott to the ground. Then he sat on top of Scott and swung his fist at Scott's face. The leather cover on Sea Keat's face was broken, revealing his mouth and nose. Luo Boat tore the leather cover from bottom to top, and finally saw the man's face. Luo Boat hadn't seen him before because he was a second-year student at the aristocrat house, but that didn't stop him from punching his acne-filled face a few more times. Finally, when Sea Keat's face was bruised and swollen, Luo Boat's anger subsided. He laughed loudly, feeling happier than ever since he'd entered the school. Sea Keat lay on the ground, panting, with tears and snot running down his face. White stared at him from the side. It was the first time he'd seen Luo Boat really hit someone. Remember the URL, MVIP can't you? 6 after that day, Luo Boat accidentally told White that he'd been kidnapped the whole night, but he didn't tell him that he'd become a woman. White had only just connected the murderer to the cult in the secret room. He was the only one who'd seen Sea Keat wearing the squid leather cover. What do we do now? White asked. Luo Boat sighed and said fiercely, what else can we do? Of course we send him to Professor Shi Erfu. I'm sure Professor Shi Erfu will deal with him properly. Don't. Sea Keat, who was playing dead on the ground, immediately screamed. Don't send me to Professor Shi Erfu. I'll be expelled. And you will also be confined. Luo Boat sneered, confinement? I'm only here for revenge. How could I be locked up? No. But White suddenly interrupted. Luo Boat, he's right. You hit him too hard. If Professor Shi Erfu finds out, not only will he be grounded, but he will also lose at least 50 marks. Luo Boat stared blankly for a moment before crying out. How is that possible? This isn't fair. White shook his head. There's nothing unfair about it. Fighting is wrong. Luo Boat. What about us? White pretended to hesitate and said, anyway, we've already had our revenge, haven't we? He didn't do anything to you last time, so why don't we just let it go? Luo Boat. But last time. White, huh? Luo Boat's face fell. Nothing. White continued. Ahem, maybe we can ask Dake. He was here just now. Where's Dake? Dake had already left. As for what White and Luo Boat wanted to do with Sea Keat, that was their own business. However, Dake speculated that White wouldn't want to take Sea Keat to Professor Shi Erfu. The flower plaque, the statue, the church, these things seemed to be connected. But if you thought about it carefully, you would find that there was a trace of unerasable strangeness. And White was already deeply involved in it. Dake, on the other hand, left after discovering that the statue wasn't anything good. But the main reason why he didn't want to get involved was because of Professor Kazair. As long as one was human, one would be biased when doing things. At night, Sea Keat limped into a secret room wearing a repaired leather case. The members of the church sat around him and couldn't help but look at the stitches on his leather case. There were a total of 16 church members present. Apart from the leader who gathered them, no one knew their true identities. From the moment he entered this room, Sea Keat was no longer Sea Keat, but Cuttlefish. So what's going on? The one who spoke was their leader. Mr. Haixing. Cuttlefish was too embarrassed to answer the leader's question. Mr. Haixing frowned. I remember telling you to observe first and not make a move. Cuttlefish finally broke down. I really didn't make a move first. Mr. Haixing was puzzled. Could it be that the Valkyrie's son made a move first? He's a treasure in the eyes of the professors, and a future star of the Shengmalian. Why would he make a move first? It wasn't them. Cuttlefish cried. It was the Valkyrie's son and his lackeys. I just moved my mouth and they made a move first. Tisk, why is the Valkyrie's son involved again? Mr. Haixing felt a headache coming on. Cuttlefish immediately shifted the blame. I was followed. The person we dealt with that night was the Valkyrie's lackey, Luo Boat Broheim. They discovered me. Mr. Haixing. How did they discover you? Cuttlefish. I don't know, I really don't know. It's not my fault. Mr. Haixing's headache worsened. Then how did you escape? Cuttlefish. The Valkyrie's son let me go. Mr. Haixing. The Valkyrie's son let you go? All the marine products looked at each other in dismay, unable to understand what was going on. One of them, the eel-headed one and the only female in the church, Miss Haixin, was puzzled. Then is Dake Dimming the person we're looking for? Cuttlefish shook his head. Although I was beaten up, he shouldn't be the one who destroyed the goddess statue. The reason for collecting flower cards might just be a hobby. Miss Heischen. Then who could it be? It can't be the Valkyrie's son, right? Right, what's his name? Pufferfish. I think his name is White God? Mr. Heisching. It's White Gouda. Pufferfish. Exclamation point. Mr. Heisching sighed. We can't cause any more trouble. We don't have much time left. We must repair the statue before the arrival of the holy night, and offer a living sacrifice to revive the goddess during the holy ceremony. Cuttlefish took off his leather case and turned back into Sea Keat. He carefully crept into the common room of the aristocrat compound. However, the person he wanted to avoid was drinking tea and reading the newspaper in the common room. Beside him were the two shameless girls. Sea Keat turned sideways, trying to avoid being seen as much as possible. However, Dake inadvertently raised his head and met Cuttlefish's gaze. Sea Keat suddenly became nervous. It was only when Dake continued to read the newspaper, as if nothing had happened, that Cuttlefish finally let out a sigh of relief. It seems that Dake Dimming really did leave first during the day. That's why he didn't see my true face under the leather case. Sea Keat quickly walked up the stairs. The narrow space of the stairs made him feel much more comfortable. He gently touched the bruises on his face and felt a sharp pain. This made him hate Luo Boat and White even more. The leader said that we can't cause any trouble before the arrival of the holy night, but on the day of the holy night. Chapter 89. Common Room. Dake put down the newspaper and looked at the information about Sea Keat in his notebook. He had a basic understanding of this second-year student. Sea Keat was actually quite famous in the second year, even though it was the opposite of him. When they heard that something happened to his family, most of the students were afraid of provoking him, so they didn't mention it. In the end, he was still misunderstood. The students were actually quite helpless. However, it was only the second month of school and their relationship wasn't that good, so they just let him be. In short, everyone had their own way of living. On Sunday, Dake fermented the remaining 3 dried white fruits and blue fruits into juice. He then mixed them and made the energy potion. This way he would have 5 energy potion cards. Remember, https://m, VIP Kanchu. VIP. Even though they couldn't use more than 3 cards of the same type in an official duel, there was no such restriction outside of the duel. Dake was already preparing for the masquerade party. Of course, Dake wasn't the only one preparing for the masquerade party. Whether it was for the academic credits, the title of the year's champion, or to attract the attention of the princesses. In short, the first-year students were more serious than ever. People who never went to the library in the past would often go there now. The reading room that always had empty seats was now packed to the brim. It could be said that they were cramming at the last minute or changing for the better. In short, the effects of the masquerade party seemed to be showing. Students at this age needed motivation. During the first class on Monday, Professor Shi Erfu explained the rules of the masquerade party. The specific rules were already logged into the school card and could be checked at any time. Professor Ka Zayer began to make ghosts and monsters. Even Professor Li Li was pulled in to help. As for the first-year students' arithmetic homework, it naturally fell into Dark's hands. It was still more than a week away from Halloween, but it felt like it would be tomorrow. The students talked about Halloween every day. Whether it was makeup, ghosts, academic credits, or princesses, they never got tired of talking about it. And on Wednesday, no one knew who brought it up first. The topic of dance partners had exploded among the first-year students. It was originally a popular topic among the upper-year students. After 3 or 4 days, it finally sank among the first-year students. This seemed to be an opportunity for the little magisters to awaken their awareness of the opposite sex. 2 months after school started, it was also the time for the little magisters to get to know each other. What was moderate? It was a superficial understanding without going deeper. In the world of men and women, the first impression was the most beautiful. A hazy relationship was the most desirable. Once it was too deep, it wouldn't be beautiful. In short, it seemed to have become a trend to send invitations to the opposite sex. Furthermore, there were many ways to invite him. Some people would send a message. Someone would hand over a letter like a confession. There were also people who would meticulously create an invitation to the ball. As the brightest star among the first-year students, Dake Dimming enjoyed almost all kinds of invitations. For example, after the summoning class on Wednesday, someone asked Deanna to send a message, but Dake decisively rejected it. He didn't even know the person's name. Deanna happily sent the message back. When he went out on Thursday morning, he found 3 letters stuffed into the crack of the door. It was 6:15 in the morning. Normally, no one would be earlier than him. Dake didn't ignore the 3 letters or throw them into the trash can. Although it was convenient, it was disrespectful to her. He picked up the 3 letters, opened them in the common room, and replied to them one by one. There was a name on the letter, but there was no room number, so he couldn't return the letters for the time being. Later, he thought about it and entrusted this task to Deanna. Deanna sent the letters back in no time. She even hummed a tune when she came back. After the second class on Thursday morning, Dake was called to the corner of the castle again. A female student from an unknown school held back her shyness and handed him an unusually delicate handmade invitation. He had no choice but to tell her that he already had a dance partner. So on Thursday afternoon, the news that Dake Dimming already had a dance partner spread like the wind throughout the first year. Deanna stayed by his side like a mother hen protecting her young. When people mentioned a dance partner, she couldn't help but hold her head high. So the news that Dake's dance partner was Deanna caught up with the previous news as if it had grown legs. After that, the number of invitations decreased visibly. Dake finally had some peace. The invitations from the first-year students gave him a feeling that they were more formal. Most people's feelings for each other were hazy. There was a strong trace of imitation. Some people even used this as a comparison. It was very immature. In the blink of an eye, it was the last weekend before Halloween. This weekend was the last chance for students who hadn't bought their costumes for the dance. White and Luo Boat were running around, looking for cheap and unique costumes. They seemed to be really enjoying Halloween, picking out the monster costumes that had been forgotten in the corner. And more people, such as Deanna and Luo C, were speeding up the production of magic elf cards. In a short time, more and more people borrowed the laboratory. It was also at this time that the students suddenly realized that the materials provided by Professor Ka Zaire were so expensive. The core materials they prepared themselves were not worth mentioning in front of the value of the materials package. In short, all kinds of problems emerged one after another, and there were even cases of people buying the wrong materials. Every laboratory was a mess. And this weekend, Dake was researching the revealing potion. Since they talked about ghosts, there was no shortage of ghosts. To identify transparent ghosts or other invisible monsters, they needed the revealing potion. In order to research this thing, Dake spent a total of 500 credits in research funds. This was extremely incredible in the eyes of the first-year students at this stage. After all, for weeks of normal lectures only cost 480 credits. Dake's final harvest was 3 bottles of revealing potion. One of the bottles failed in the process of making a magic potion card, and was consumed. The second bottle was a lucky success. The magic potion card produced was in the form of a prop card. But it was no longer a potion, but a kind of revealing powder card. The need to find the location of the invisible unit was the limitation of the revealing powder. But Dake was already quite satisfied. On Sunday evening, under the afterglow of the setting sun, the blonde boy tasted the unscented black tea as usual, and quietly flipped through the books. Another invitation for the masquerade party was sent to him. Chapter 90. Ai Motisai rested her chin on her hand as she pulled at the Golden King and the secret treasure book on the table. Her eyes were drifting as she looked to the left. The senior librarian had some sort of relationship with the Duke's son at some point in time. Dake Dimming, who used to walk around the counter, would now stop in front of the counter for a minute or two. Ai Ma had heard a lot of rumors about Panduola Doragon. She didn't go out of her way to inquire about it. She just sat in the common room of the Knights Academy and heard rumors about her from time to time. When they talked about her, they always spoke in a tone of reverence and admiration. as if they weren't talking about someone of the same age, but, a goddess. Hitu. Would a goddess shamelessly stick to someone like that? Aima snorted. Dake glanced sideways at the ball invitation that Panduola personally handed to him. He was very curious about where she bought the shell of this thing. The website was https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. Well, the senior's fingers were really white, and her nails were narrow and long. It felt like they could easily scratch the depths of one's heart. Do you want it? Panduola bent down. Her tight uniform couldn't support her towering figure, which tested one's heart. Her breath carried a hint of fragrance that floated to the tip of one's nose. Dake pushed the invitation back without hesitation. Sorry, I have. You're already so familiar with it? Panduola took the invitation back. In reality, it was just a blank piece of paper. However, her eyebrows drooped slightly, and she squeezed out a trace of disappointment. Her slender fingers quietly pointed at Aima, who was diagonally behind her. Her upper body continued to lean forward as she whispered, "It can't be her, right?" Dake frowned. This was the second time Panduola paired him with Aima. Did the two of them give off such a feeling to outsiders? Panduola's mind was sharp. Her eyes flashed, and she said with a smile, "If you have it, we can exchange it," Dake said helplessly. "The theme of Halloween is not a dance party." Panduola, Christmas then? Dake. In fact, Panduola was only there to suck on her juniors after work to ease her mood. She left the library not long after that. Unlike the calmness of the lower grade students, the upper grade students were actually under a lot of pressure. Moreover, the more outstanding a student was, the more so it was. Schoolwork and competitions were indispensable. Especially since she also had to work as a librarian, she had to manage her time better than her peers. Lady Bella had suggested to her many times that she relinquish this responsibility, but she had always refused without hesitation. When she was in first grade, it was her job as a librarian that had saved her from confusion. Humans should never forget their roots. Once you forget your roots, you will no longer be human. On the way, she thought of her cute junior. Yeah, that feeling of being a little stubborn is pretty good too. Dake Dimming was vexed. He had been forced to agree to the Christmas dance party, although it was one-sided. Even though he didn't care who his Christmas partner would be, he felt like he had lost if it was decided just like that. Thinking about it, he suddenly realized, could this be the bitterness and melancholy of puberty? Dake quickly threw away his thoughts. Today was the 29th of October. The night after tomorrow was Halloween. The masquerade party is the day after tomorrow. In the corner of the reading room, Victor almost broke his pen in half. In order to create the magic card for the masquerade party, he and Luoboat had been studying here for the entire afternoon, but they were still a mess. The more complicated the magic card creation, the more precise the various data requirements, and the less parts that could be followed. If one wanted to create their own magic card, they had to learn how to calculate. Calculation, arithmetic. Before learning the magic language in second grade, arithmetic class was the biggest nightmare of the little magisters. White's patience was actually pretty good, but he still gradually lost it as the numbers piled up. Just when 90% of his brain was filled with irritation, he saw the moon in the depths of his heart. From one of the entrances of the reading room, he walked into his white moonlight. Unrequited love was a very strange emotion. He was alone, locked in his own world. As long as he did not expose it, it would only get bigger and bigger. White once wanted to use taboo love to check the favorability of his senior Panduola under Luoboat's instigation. But that day, Panduola happened to not be there. So he could not muster up the courage anymore. As long as he did not open his eyes, he would not wake up from his dream. He probably knew that he and his senior were two people on a parallel line. Of course, in his subconscious mind, that was just the current situation. The future would be different. This masquerade party was an opportunity. If he could become the champion of the first grade, he could more or less attract her attention. At that time, White felt that he would be more confident. Maybe he could invite her to dance at the Christmas ball. The Christmas ball was the real ball. What was the Halloween ball? It wasn't until he noticed from afar that Senior Pandora handed an invitation to the dance party to Dark that he suddenly realized what was going on. The Halloween ball was also a ball. Fortunately, Dake did not seem to accept. But was this really a blessing? He did not accept because Dake already had a dance partner. Otherwise, who would refuse Panduola's invitation? Also, when did Dake become so close to Panduola? Crack. The lead of the pencil was poked and broke. I will win. The Shungmalian night sky was still so clear, like a pitch-black mirror that reflected people's hearts, but did not let people see through it. A new week. Monday's classes were unstable, and the professors did not want to teach. Tuesday and Wednesday were holidays. But on Tuesday afternoon, all the students were asked to return to the tower dormitory. They could only walk out of the tower at 6 o'clock in the evening. That was when the masquerade party began. There was no opening ceremony. The ghosts and monsters that filled the castle were the best opening ceremony. Ghosts, zombies, mummies, jack pumpkins. When the clock struck 6 o'clock, it was the night of 100 ghosts and monsters. The huge castle was the stage of the students, but also the stage of the ghosts and monsters. The 1,000 students in their costumes. The princess mixed in with a mask. The monsters and monsters dancing wildly in the chaos. Gazing at the ancient castle, the long moon. The fog and the truth always appeared on the chessboard at the same time. Who could find their truth at the ball? Who could dig out the final truth in the chaos? Who could seize the dream in the midst of the revelry? Walking with the brave. Walking with the princess. Walking with the demon god. Let's fool around together. There should be nothing else at night. +3 today, before 6 o'clock. If not, it would be +4 tomorrow. Chapter 91. In the tower of the aristocrat's house. Dake dripped a drop of cat juice on the roots of the catnip grass, and watered some magic potion on the wormwood. He then nodded in satisfaction. Apart from other things, growing flowers and plants really cultivated one's sentiments. Growing something at home would make one miss more. It would make one feel that life was not so empty. After putting the catnip grass back into the sleeping basket, Dake began to carefully check the things that he brought with him. The masquerade ball started at 6 o'clock in the evening, and lasted until the clock struck 12. The students would welcome a new day in the hall. During this period, they had to go deep into the castle to find hidden ghosts and monsters and kill them. The credits obtained from killing ghosts and monsters would be recorded on the school card. Using the school card, one could even check their ranking in each year, and in each school. The most dazzling thing was naturally the overall ranking. Different from the year champion, the overall ranking champion would not only receive the special title of champion, but also receive a huge amount of credits and rare resources as a reward. Remember the website, MVIP can't you? 6 Therefore, even the senior students would go all out at the masquerade ball. It wasn't an easy task to snatch credits from the fingers of the advanced students. Fortunately, the college had the relevant regulations. Ghosts and monsters were from 1 star to 8 star. Third-year students who killed 1-star ghosts and monsters would not receive any credits. Fourth-year students who killed 2-star ghosts and monsters below would not receive any credits. Fifth-year students who killed 3-star ghosts and monsters below would not receive any credits. Sixth-year students who killed 4-star ghosts and monsters below would not receive any credits. Dake's goal was very clear. He wanted to obtain more credits. Therefore, they couldn't put too much weight on their clothes. It was best to only bring a card bag. Dake took out the magic cards and organized them. It had been exactly 2 months since school started. Not counting the flower cards, Dark already had a total of 16 magic cards just in terms of magic cards. 1. Pride I 2. Pride 2 3. Bliss I 4. Bliss 3 5. Magical Beast, Ivan 6. Trash Slime 7. Kettle 8. Happy Card 9. Silencing Potion 8. Revealing Powder, X29. Energy Potion, X5. With the addition of the branch card, there were 17 cards. On the other hand, the card packs provided by the Academy could fill up to 21 magic cards. So he thought for a moment and put the outfit card into it. He also put notes, a pencil, an eraser, and a magic pen in the interlayer. Everything was ready. Dake changed into the Evernight Prince outfit, put on the half-black crow mask, tidied his hair, and opened the door. Hey! Deanna jumped out of the grass. Deanna, who had put on the Night Princess outfit, was like a fairy walking out of the night, elegant, beautiful, and lovely. Beside her was Luosi, who had his soft blonde hair tied up in a hat, and was wearing a white officer's uniform. He was inexplicably handsome. According to Luosi herself, she wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to experience what it was like to be a boy. From a psychological point of view, this was her subconscious desire to be a cousin. Both of them had yet to put on their masks. It was obvious that they had been waiting here on purpose. Dake pressed between his eyebrows helplessly. Deanna stretched out her small white hand and pouted. Where's the candy? Meow. The cat plant revealed half of its face from behind Dake. Luosi, who was beside Deanna, suddenly brightened up. Dake, you also have a cat plant. Dake changed the topic. I've had it for quite some time. Luosi looked at the cat plant that had a bud on its head and said enviously, That's great. My Garfield is already as fat as a ball. Dake laughed. Being fat has its benefits. Plus, the cat plant won't get sick because of being fat. That's true. Luosi showed a rare hint of subjective opinion. My Garfield is very comfortable when rubbing it. It's just that sometimes, when I wake up in the morning, I find my stomach uncomfortable. Dake laughed. Haha, my cat plant likes to sleep next to my pillow. Deanna pouted. No, Deanna has to buy one too. The three of them laughed and walked to the common room. Deanna and Luosi also put on the black crow mask and peacock plume mask respectively when they went downstairs. When they arrived, the common room was already full of people. Thanks to the spacious common room, it was able to squeeze in all 6 grades. Standing on the stairs and looking out, they could see that most of the seniors were wearing formal wear. It was neither exaggerated nor simple, just like the type that would be worn at a normal banquet. Some of the upperclassmen even had a red rose in their chest pocket. Their purpose was obvious. But probably no one would have thought that the homogeneity of the makeup would be so serious. If only 1 or 2 people were wearing this, it would be fine. But with dozens of people wearing it together, it was inevitable that they would become a crowd. But now that things had come to this, there was nothing they could do. If they wanted to stand out, they could only rely on their strength. The seniors rubbed their palms in anticipation. The juniors still maintained their childlike innocence, and were dressed in all kinds of monster costumes. And according to Dake's understanding of the twin princesses, they were likely more interested in the students who dressed up as monsters. That was not the cute and obedient little cutie that she appeared to be. On the other hand, the eldest princess was a person who was as beautiful and elegant as she looked, gentle and virtuous. Perhaps she would have a good impression of the Assassai man. Magic Institute Tower. Even though it was almost 6 o'clock, Panduola was still in her dorm room. She was wearing a snow-white bridal gown, which was the embodiment of her beautiful vision. This was the 4th year that Panduola had participated in the Institute's masquerade ball. Of course, she knew how crowded the common room would be at this time. There was no need to squeeze in there just to grab a little bit of the opportunity. As long as she moved a little bit, she could avoid a lot of trouble, so why not? Night Institute Tower. White and Luoboat had already been squeezed into French fries. The two of them had bought the costumes they were wearing on Saturday. Luoboat was wearing a one-piece werewolf costume. This was obviously not a costume that ordinary people could wear, but Luoboat had enough physique and strength. In the end, White couldn't give up her face and wore a vampire countess costume that revealed half of her face. Vampires and werewolves. Interesting. Fool's Institute Tower. Finally, at the moment that everyone had been waiting for, the hour hand pointed straight down. A loud bell rang from the spiral clock tower, located in the center of the institute. Duong. The gate was opened. The students immediately rushed out of their respective towers like rabbits that had escaped from their cages. Almost 1,000 students swarmed into St. Marianne's castle in an instant. The sleeping ghosts opened their eyes, and what greeted them were countless black bats. Under the baptism of the bats, the first-year students mixed in with the crowd excitedly rushed into the castle. Chapter 92. St. Marian's Castle, excluding the basement that no one knew of, had a total of 9 floors. The place that the students used for classes only occupied a very small part of the castle. Even the graduates who had stayed in the castle for 6 years were rarely able to explore the map on the surface. If there was no masquerade party, the number of students would be even lower. This was obviously a good opportunity to explore the map. At the same time when the students were pouring into the castle, accompanied by the principal of Aerdii, the only 3 princesses of the kingdom also stepped into the castle. The eldest princess, Elisha. The second princess, Anna, was born in advance because of a 3-second advantage. The third princess, Anchi, lost her life because of a 3-second disadvantage. The 3 princesses changed into makeup clothes to cover their faces. Remember, https://mvip can't you? VIP. The principal of Aerdii asked with concern. Do you really not need me to accompany you? Princess Elisha nodded slightly and said, this is a rare chance to relax. I want to walk alone. If possible, please take care of my 2 sisters. They are quite naughty. And she, who was trying to hide in the teddy bear, raised her head sharply and said angrily, Sister, didn't you say you wouldn't expose my shortcomings in front of outsiders? Princess Elisha pinched her soft cheeks, and a trace of affection flashed in her eyes. The principal of Aerdii is not an outsider. And she still puffed up her cheeks. Anna, who was beside her, suddenly reached out and poked her. She chuckled and said, Little sister who never grows up. And she said angrily, You are the little sister. Anna raised her neck like a white swan. I am the elder sister. I won't lower myself to the level of a little sister. Princess Anna suddenly turned around and asked, By the way, Aunt Cynthia, is that annoying guy Dake Dimming also here? The principal of Aerdii showed a gentle smile. Yes, he has just entered the school this year. At this time next year, he will be your senior. It can't be? Princess Anna didn't seem to remember that until now. She said stiffly. Then can I not come here next year? Elisa flicked her on the forehead. Don't be ridiculous. Didn't you say that you wanted to graduate from the same school as your sister? Anna, times have changed, ouch. Ha ha ha, little brat, you don't care about the overall situation. And she took the opportunity to hit her on the head, put on a leather bag and ran away. Anna immediately gave chase with bared fangs and brandished claws. Elisha quickly looked at Aerdii and said, Principal. Principal Aerdii nodded slightly. Then 2 elves holding school cards flew out from his side and quickly caught up with Anna and Anchi. Elisha let out a sigh of relief. She put on the exquisite mask that only revealed her nose and mouth. Principal, I will take my leave now. Southwest of the castle, on the 2nd floor. Dake didn't manage to get rid of Anna and Luosi in the crowd. He could only walk with them for a while. The second-year students and above had experience, and were relatively purposeful. Soon, they ran to different parts of the castle. The first-year students, on the other hand, were completely scattered. Dake, should we go after them? Deanna looked anxious. She was like a child who was afraid that her candy would be taken away. Luosi also looked at Dake. Dake patted his forehead. It seemed that he really needed to take them with him for a while. He said patiently, Don't worry, the professors must have prepared enough ghosts. At the beginning of the ball, even if you don't look for them, they will come to you. He said as he pointed above his head. Diana jerked her head up and saw a hanged ghost with an extremely long neck hanging down from the ceiling. Wow! Ah! Deanna immediately took out her magic card and excitedly summoned her fantasy beast, Polar Bear. The polar bear landed in a white light. It immediately stood up and clawed at the hanged ghost. Luosi screamed and instinctively grabbed Dake's arm. Deanna instantly made a decision and grabbed Dake's other arm. Dark, who had both his arms grabbed, could only helplessly watch as the polar bear's claws passed through the hanged ghost's ghostly body. Then the hanged ghost stuck out its blood-red tongue and licked the polar bear's nape. The polar bear suddenly trembled. It was infuriated. Kikik. The hanged ghost laughed and used its tongue to tease the polar bear again and again. It never got tired. The polar bear, on the other hand, was like a kitten chasing after a butterfly. The polar bear, which was purely physical, was not compatible with ghosts. Even if it was just a one-star hanged ghost, it was enough to torment them. In the end, Luosi summoned the courage to summon Fantasy Beast, Snow Rabbit, and sent it to the sky with a breath of ice fog. When the hanged ghost disappeared, a piece of candy suddenly fell down. Dake, who was finally free, bent down to pick up the candy on the ground. With a trace of suspicion, he peeled off the candy wrapper. The candy itself looked like an extremely ordinary toffee. However, the candy wrapper was engraved with fine lines. Dake suddenly realized. So the candy wrapper is the real thing. Deanna saw his happy face and asked, "Dake, did you find anything?" Dake wanted to throw away the toffee wrapped in the candy wrapper. However, he suddenly saw Deanna staring at him. He clasped the candy wrapper and handed the toffee to her. Ah! Deanna bit into the toffee. Dake then picked up the candy wrapper and looked at it carefully. This is a one-time use magic card. It should have been injected with magic power in advance. It can last until 12 o'clock at night. Dake was very interested in this kind of craftsmanship. He carefully put away the candy wrapper. Let's continue. Half an hour later. The three of them killed each other on the second floor. Dake reached out to wipe the cream from Deanna's mouth and put the 13th candy wrapper into his pocket. Most of the ghosts they encountered along the way were 1-star and 2-star. Some dropped toffee, some dropped candy apples, and some dropped a small piece of pumpkin pie. But they were all wrapped in exquisite wrappers. What a wonderful dessert for the ball. Dake finished the last bit of pumpkin pie and said to Deanna and Luosi, "Next, let's split up." Let me see. Let's meet in the lobby on the first floor in 5 hours. Deanna said obediently. Okay, see you at the ball. Luosi also smiled and said, "Don't worry about us." During this half an hour, Dake didn't do anything. He was basically guiding Deanna and Luosi to cooperate with each other to catch the ghosts. Unknowingly, the two of them actually had a ranking in the first years of the aristocratic academy, within the top 12. It seemed that although they were only dealing with the low-level ghosts that jumped out on their own, their progress was faster than many others. And Dake himself was currently +0. Although Dake himself didn't care, someone in a corner of the castle seemed to be paying attention to his ranking. White was ranked 3rd in the first-year Knight Academy ranking. When he saw that Dake's name wasn't in the first-year Aristocrat Academy ranking, he couldn't help but become more excited. Keep up the good work, Luo Boat. Okay. Yesterday's chapter was +2, +3 failed, +4 today. Chapter 93. Dake, who had successfully separated from Deanna and Luosi, walked alone in a dark and gloomy corner of the castle. The further away from the classroom, the fewer students there were. As for the upperclassmen, they would usually head straight for the higher floors. There were more ghosts and monsters of a higher star level there. Therefore, the second and third floors of the castle were the most suitable places for the upperclassmen to hunt. However, Dake realized that he seemed to have underestimated the creepiness and terror of the castle. It was already late autumn, when the temperature suddenly dropped. The night wind would blow in from time to time, and it would make people shiver uncontrollably. He put his palms together and exhaled. He couldn't help but summon his familiar, the little devil beast. "Are you my master?" "Yes, I am." "Eh?" It saw its master, who had never answered it before, suddenly reply in a very normal way. Website. https://m. Vipcanshu. VIP. The little devil beast suddenly felt that the atmosphere was not right, and then its face turned gloomy. Ta ta ta. The crisp sound of footsteps echoed in the silent castle, and it was getting closer and closer as time passed. The little devil beast trembled as it stared at the shadow of the corner in front of it. Half of a jack pumpkin that was covered in muscles slowly appeared, and the empty pumpkin head was burning with a dim yellow candle flame. Jack. The jack pumpkin suddenly let out a low roar, and its pitch-black muscles instantly expanded. When it saw Dake, it suddenly sped up. "No way, sir." The little devil beast let out a terrified scream, and the thought of running for its life rose in an instant. However, just as the thought formed, the dark golden ball of light with a long tail drilled into the back of its head. The little devil beast, which was abnormally scared just a moment ago, instantly narrowed its eyes and looked at the Jack Pumpkin with disdain and disdain. A mere bastard that can't even survive in the lowest level of hell. And you dare to roar in front of me? The little devil beast covered its body with its wings like a cape, and it actually showed the elegance of a vampire beast. It looked down at the Jack Pumpkin from the corner of its eyes, and the moment it ran over, it shot out 3 small darts. Die. Pooh. One of the syringes pierced the muscles on Jack Pumpkin's left shoulder, but the other 2 missed their target. Jack Pumpkin dodged the attack the moment it sensed the threat. It crouched down when it was hit in the shoulder. Then it tightened the muscles in its legs and exploded. Swish. It leaped into the air. It directly crossed the distance between itself and the little demonic beast, and its demonic claws viciously clawed at the little demonic beast flying in the air. Jack. It was as if space itself was being torn apart. 3 pitch-black claw shadows appeared in the air. However, the little demonic beast that had maintained its absolute arrogance from beginning to end, and had not taken half a step back, had suddenly disappeared into thin air. Jack. By the time Jack Pumpkin reacted, the shark head syringe had already pierced through the relatively fragile pumpkin wall, and hit the candle flame in the pumpkin's heart. Pooh. The candle flame suddenly went out. The carcass of the Jack Pumpkin that fell from the sky gradually turned into sparks, leaving only a small piece of pumpkin pie floating in the air. Dake walked over from behind and grabbed the pumpkin pie. Credits +30. Is it really a 3-star monster? Dake carefully peeled off the tinfoil wrapping of the pumpkin pie and put away the wrapping paper. Then he threw the pumpkin pie to the little demonic beast. Slap. The little demonic beast slapped the pumpkin pie away with its wings. I am a little demonic beast. I don't eat food that is given to me. Asterisk. If an overly arrogant person doesn't have the ability to match it, the more I look at it, the more I look at it. Dake silently summed up his experience. At the same time, he learned a lesson. During the battle with Jack Pumpkin just now, the little demonic beast stubbornly refused to dodge because of the arrogance in its heart. It was all thanks to him using the school card to forcefully recall it in time that it avoided the 3-star Jack Pumpkin's almost fatal claw. Otherwise, the little demonic beast would have been badly damaged and pitifully waiting to recover in the school card. But why is this Jack Pumpkin a little different from the ones I encountered before? Recalling the Jack Pumpkin that he encountered with Deanna and the others, Dake felt a little apprehensive. A normal Jack Pumpkin should have a pumpkin head. A small monster with 4 skinny limbs would at most hold a small axe, and a small wooden axe without a blade. But what the hell was that muscular pumpkin that he encountered just now? Professor Kazir shouldn't have such a bad taste, right? As he thought about it, Dake's footsteps suddenly froze. He finally remembered. When he was painstakingly correcting the first-year math homework, the person who was called by Professor Kazir to help create a monster was that little fairy named Lily. At this moment, Dake suddenly had a bad premonition. Against the strong ominous feeling, Dake turned into an unused classroom that was covered in dust. In theory, when the professors placed the monsters, they would always hide the more aggressive monsters in the room, or in some hidden corner. The monsters that would appear in the aisles to tease the students were the type that leaned towards the funny side. If he wanted to obtain credits faster, he had to find these hidden monsters that had extra credits as rewards. Only by walking into the shadows could he obtain the treasures. Bang! The 2 doors at the front and back of the classroom suddenly closed. The window on the other side was blown open by the strong wind. Fresh blood flowed down the old curtains and gradually dyed them red. Dake held his breath and his right hand had already reached into his card bag. The little devil monster still maintained the pride-eye state and flew in the air with its chin held high. Whoosh! Another gust of wind blew in. The bright moonlight shone in through the gap between the blown curtains, and there was a glimmer of light in the dark classroom. Dake fiercely clenched his teeth. Behind the blown curtains, there was a monster with a human head and a bird's body that stood motionless on the windowsill. In the big mouth that revealed 2 fangs, there was a bloody severed hand. Although it was unlikely to be a real severed hand, Dake couldn't help but shiver. Harpy. The battle started 10 seconds after they met. The prideful little demon beast seemed to be feeling humiliated by its defeat against Jack Pumpkin. At this time, It didn't need Dake's order and charged fearlessly. Quick! Dake immediately took out a happy card. And this time the summoning speed was even faster. The happy card took effect almost immediately, and the light that shot out shone into the harpy's eyes. This moment of confusion caused the harpy to miss the opportunity to react. The little devil beast was able to kick her in the face and send her flying. Gee! The harpy's sharp cry came from below the window. Chapter 94. The effect of the happy card lasted surprisingly short. The harpy immediately woke up after falling, and a piercing scream pierced the night sky. The bright moon in the sky was unusually bright. The little demon beast wanted to take advantage of the victory to pursue, but Dake, who arrived in time, grabbed the back of its head. The little demon beast, who was grabbed by Dake with one hand like a basketball, flapped its wings and tried to struggle. Dake jerked down and then shrunk into a ball. Almost in the next second, a gust of wind rushed in, and an extremely narrow wind blade tore the curtain and cut the podium diagonally. Bang! The falling curtain, the collapsing podium. The harpy's scream pierced the eardrums. Dake covered his ears, but the sound waves continued to enter his ears, making him feel dizzy. Remember the URL. VIP can't you? VIP. After about a few seconds, the sound waves suddenly stopped. 2 skills. Dake calculated in his heart. Most of the magic elf skills had a cooldown, and skills like the Windsickle Weasel and Banshee's Howl couldn't be fired continuously. And having 2 skills was already considered a very precious purple card. The probability that this harpy didn't have any skills for the time being was very high. Therefore he turned around and threw the little demon beast out like a softball. The little demon beast didn't expect that it would become a meat bomb. The moment it was thrown out, it only had time to scream. Then it instinctively closed its wings and grabbed the harpy's face. 2 sharp claws were clasped around her neck. Taking a closer look, the little demon beast's body structure was actually 70% similar to the harpy's. Dake looked at the little demon beast's small dart, quickly condensing, and knew that tonight was over. Although there was a so-called difference in defense value between the magic elf, the powerless magic elf was like a guard who had put down a huge shield. It was just flesh and blood. It was impossible for the little demon beast's small dart to not pierce the delicate skin of a harpy. After a while, the little fiendish beast flew back with an exquisite gift box in its hand. Dake pulled the gift box from under his claws, undid the ribbon, and opened the packaging. Similar to those candies, the outer packaging was still a one-time use magic card, but what was inside was no longer candies and desserts. Dake couldn't help but smile. Inside the gift box was a harpy feather. Judging from the magic waves emanating from the feather, it must be the most precious core material. Immediately, he wrapped the feather in the wrapping paper again, and carefully put it into his card pouch. Credits plus 60. Double credits. There are additional materials. Dake suddenly felt like he was addicted. He rested for a while. Dake pulled himself together and continued on his way. The little demonic beast, who had recovered from the state of pride eye, was now walking on the ground with its head down and mumbling something of unknown meaning. Dake ignored it. Instead, he was thinking about his next destination. The probability of a hidden monster appearing in a few consecutive classrooms was not high, but he still searched them one by one. It was not until the washroom in the corner of the castle appeared in front of him that he suddenly stopped. Blood flowed out from the washroom. Bang! In the next moment, the door of the washroom was kicked from the inside and countless debris burst out. A figure screamed as he flew out and slammed into the wall. A large amount of water gushed out from the washroom. The person who screamed and flew out was also washed over by the water. Dake began to run back without thinking. It was not until he ran 5 or 6 meters that the tide behind him suddenly stopped and scattered in all directions. Dake's mind moved and he saw a mermaid with disheveled hair swimming out crazily from the washroom. They were completely different from the ones in the fairy tales. They had sharp teeth, scarlet eyes, and ugly scales on their faces. The mermaid rode the waves and chased after the student. Blood flowed out as the student narrowly escaped death. Dake lowered his head and saw a body wrapped in a school uniform was washed to the front by the water and was lying motionless. He frowned and gestured to the little demon. You go. The little demon curled up at his feet reluctantly walked forward a few steps. When it was in front of the body, it used the tip of its wing to poke the body. Wah! The body suddenly flipped over and revealed a green and ugly face with blood flowing out. It's a goblin. The goblin that pretended to be a student jumped up and stabbed the dagger in its hand at the sluggish little demon. But what was pierced by the dagger was only an afterimage of the little demon. The real little demon had already turned into light. Dake grabbed the school card and quickly retreated. After a few seconds he summoned it again. Wah, too sinister. That scared the hell out of me. Looking at the little demon with lingering fear, Dake once again took out Bliss Eye and whispered, "It's time." Pride Eye, as cooldown hadn't finished so he could only use the new Great Sin card. Luckily, Dake had enough Great Sin cards at this time. Bliss Eye instantly gushed out a pink mist. After receiving Bliss Eye, as buff, the little demon's eyes became blurred. But the threat of the ugly mermaid and the green goblin was right in front of it. It didn't completely lose its mind because of this. After all, it was only Bliss Eye. The little demon that regained its digital beast ability immediately shot 3 syringes at the goblin that pretended to be a student, who knew that the goblin suddenly rolled and dodged all the small darts. Then its muscular thighs instantly exerted force, and its whole body shot out like a small missile. The dagger in its fingers turned into a poisonous snake and fiercely stabbed at the defenseless little demon. Squeak! A cry rang out. The goblin let out a blood-curdling scream as he was sent flying by little Ivan, who had just appeared. The little demon angrily followed and took the opportunity to use Crazy Stomp on the goblin. Wah! The ugly mermaid suddenly screamed. From the water beside it suddenly pulled out a long whip made of water elements and fiercely whipped at the little demon. Magic summoning. Dake used his middle finger and index finger to grab the energy potion and fiercely swiped it. Ivan's body instantly lit up with a blazing white light. Magic plus 200. Mimic. A moment later, a long whip that was also made of water elements flew over and scattered the mermaid's long whip in the nick of time. Squeak. Ibrahimovic stepped on the wet floor in high spirits. After consuming 100 points of magic power, the imitation skill in its skill bar temporarily changed to Imitation, Water Whip. Chapter 95. This was the first time Dake tried Imitate in a real battle. For Ivan, who only had 100 points of mana, Imitate, which consumed 100 points of mana, could only be used as a last attack before death like Deathly Whisper. However, with the boost from the energy potion he successfully used Imitate while standing. Before the next use of Imitate, Water Whip would become his inherent skill. Unlike the mermaid's Water Whip, when Ivan used Imitate, he consciously condensed the water elements into a long whip and spun it, causing the power of Water Whip to increase dramatically and shatter the mermaid's long whip. Then he continued to control the spinning long whip and shot it at the mermaid like a snake. Wah! The mermaid screamed again and pulled out a second long whip from the water, but it was still mercilessly shattered. Earbook's whip of water viciously lashed its body, sending it flying backwards. An eye for an eye. I remember it in 1 second. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP nen Ivan is me. Credits plus 20. Credits plus 60. Regrettably, the goblin disguised as a student was only an ordinary 2-star ghost. Dake used the goblin's last ripple, candy apple to stuff the little devil's mouth and forcefully pushed it away. Then he strode towards where the mermaid had disappeared. A small gift box was floating quietly. He opened the gift box and really obtained a mermaid scale. The scale emitted an unusually dense mana aura. Although it was similar to the harpy's feather and was not a rare resource, it was already a very good reward for a Year 1 student who had difficulty obtaining credits. Dark put the scale into his card bag with a smile on his face. Regardless of whether he would use it in the future, he would keep it for now. In less than half an hour, Dake's credits went from +0 to +170, and he jumped to the bottom of the Year 1 Aristocrat Academy rankings. He did not pay attention to this and continued to explore excitedly. Those hidden ghosts were unexpectedly interesting. An entire hour had passed since the masquerade party began. The students of the 6th grade continued to disperse during this hour. They began to spread out from the areas that they would normally use for classes, covering every corner of the castle. In an unknown dark corner, the members of the 16 orders gathered one after another. When the last of the blowfish finally arrived, Leader Haixing walked out from the shadows. The restoration of the statue has been completed. It's time. Pick up your weapons, Holy War. Victory will be ours in the end. Let those bastards know who the real winner is. It's time to pay the price. For the goddess. The order will win. Time's up. The 16 members of the church suddenly took off their black robes, revealing the leather sheaths under the black robes. The attire that would normally be seen as heresy was very common in a masquerade ball. After encouraging each other, they spread out in groups of 2. Why you? Squid was assigned to travel with the pufferfish. The pufferfish was assigned to travel with the squid. The two of them disliked each other, but they still moved forward together. The road ahead was definitely not a smooth one. Only by helping each other could they move forward with difficulty. Squid took out a list that the church had drawn up in advance. The list was densely packed with the names of couples, all of whom were considered heresy by the church. The pufferfish also had a list in his hands. Their goal was to select at least 3 couples from this list before 10 o'clock. They had to first confirm whether the feelings between them were sincere. Only couples with sincere feelings were qualified to become living sacrifices for the saints. If it was just a fake couple, then they were not even worthy of being a living sacrifice. Let's start with the couple from the 2nd grade. I've been paying attention to their whereabouts. Seakeet under the squid's leather sheath revealed an extremely gloomy expression. This couple was his classmate in the 2nd grade of the Aristocrat Academy. Day after day, every day, they were showing off their love in front of him. He had wanted to strangle them more than once. Now he finally had the chance. Pufferfish. Wait, Squid, why don't we start with the couple from the 1st grade? They are more naive and weaker. Squid said gloomily. Don't you know that newbies are all monsters? Pufferfish! Exclamation point. Mary and Brooke in the 2nd grade were childhood sweethearts who had been together since childhood. They were the type that had been betrothed before they were born. The two of them were born together, grew up together, and received an invitation from the Shungmalian Academy together. The two families had been friends for generations, and there were cases of intermarriage between their ancestors. This time, both parents were very willing to see the marriage between the two of them, and they themselves were very satisfied with each other. At least until they came into contact with more of the colorful world. They were still in the state of a stupid couple who only saw each other. It was also because of this that once they entered the state, they would start to show off their love regardless of where they were, often giving people critical hits. Seakeet had had enough of them. He wanted to capture them and send them to the temple so that the goddess could give them the final judgment. The flames of jealousy burned more and more fiercely. The anger accumulated more and more. Seakeet could only obtain a moment of peace by hiding himself in the cold leather sheath. Found them. The adulterous couple finally appeared in his field of vision. Seakeet narrowed his eyes. During the masquerade party, the two of them actually hit on the outdoor bridge and enjoyed the romance of bathing in the moonlight. Is it them? At some point, Pufferfish's eyes were also burning with flames. It's them. But it's not time to act yet. First, we have to confirm whether their feelings are sincere. A sinister smile appeared at the corner of Seakeet's mouth. Anna and Enchi ran recklessly in the empty castle. The two little princesses, one wearing a teddy bear costume, and the other wearing a teddy bear costume, chased and played with each other to their heart's content. The ghosts that dared to peep around them were all chased away by the 2 elves of Principal Aertii. At the moment when the internal disputes in the kingdom were getting more and more intense, the 2 little princesses, who had to wait until they reached adulthood to have the right to inherit, were not at the center of the power struggle. But as the daughters of the 2nd princess consort, they were still the representatives of the power behind the 2nd princess consort. Although they were usually mischievous, they were actually very clear-headed. Princess Elisha was the daughter of the empress and had the highest status. Prince Charles was the son of the first princess consort, and was the only male heir of the king. If the first princess succeeded the throne, the status of women would rise. If the first prince succeeded the throne, they would still be incomparably noble, but they would lack the initiative in matters such as marriage. Therefore, they temporarily showed their bias towards the first princess. Anna, who ran to the castle window, suddenly had her eyes light up. And there's a squid over there. It's a squid. Chapter 96. Hey. The second princess Anna tiptoed to the window of the castle and looked at the bridge on the second floor from the third floor. The three-eyed squid descended from the sky and seized the opportunity to grab the little sister on the bridge. The little brother who was dating the little sister was about to make a move when the squid's tentacle reached his throat. Seakeet, who was wearing a squid leather jacket, walked out from the other end of the bridge and said in a hoarse voice filtered by the leather jacket, "You better not scream, or the skin on your throat won't be as hard as your mouth." Bruta swallowed his saliva and looked timidly at his childhood sweetheart who was caught by the squid's tentacle. But Mary shouted without hesitation, "This is a magic elf. Someone is attacking us. Bruta, go call the professor." Bruta mustered up his courage and shouted, "But if I leave, what will you do?" "Mary, don't worry, we are husband and wife appointed by God. This is just a test that must be passed. I will be fine. Then I will really go." Bruta took a small step back. Mary's eyebrows trembled. "Go quickly, I will wait for you." "Wait for me." Bruta turned around abruptly and really ran away. Website. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP even an 8 o'clock TV show wouldn't dare to act like this. Seeing Bruta's back disappear at the end of the bridge, Mary's face darkened. She said in a low voice, "Okay, classmate. Attacking people in school is not a fun script. When I was in first grade, I saw you studying how to refine a three-eyed squid." Seakeet. The three-eyed squid seemed to feel its master's emotions, and the tentacle that was grabbing Mary really loosened. Mary forcefully pried open the tentacle and slid to the ground. She turned around and gave a flying kick. Before that, a magic card slipped from her sleeve to her fingertips. In just 3 seconds of summoning time, her flying foot was covered with a layer of shimmering metal leg armor. Bang! The instant burst of power was unparalleled. The three-eyed squid's contact surface with the foot instantly caved in. And then it suddenly let out a scream. Its huge body was kicked out like a rubber ball and slammed into the wall of the castle. Smack! Seakeet. Mary clapped her hands and said softly, "It's a Halloween ball. I don't really want to know what you and your companions are doing. Tell him to let Broda go, and I can pretend that this didn't happen, okay?" Before she could finish her sentence, she looked up and saw a small tiger with snow-white wings descending from the sky. It hammered Seakeet's cuttlefish skin. Seakeet suddenly screamed and lost consciousness. The second princess put away the magic wings card in her hand and awkwardly patted the dust off her tiger skin case, saying cleverly, "Hello, big sister." It was an expert. Anna originally wanted to perform the scene of a magical girl descending from the sky to beat up the bad guy, but she did not expect that the bad guy had already been killed the moment she jumped out of the window. Mary clearly saw through Anna's intentions and immediately revealed a gentle smile. "You're a first-year student?" Anna rolled her eyes. "That's right." After that, she naturally became entangled with this valiant young lady. Until Mary rescued her childhood sweetheart from the pufferfish's hands, she had been following them. On the other side, the third princess Chi, who was wearing a teddy bear costume, made a tisk sound and happily ran off to another road. So the two little princesses went their separate ways. Seakeet was awakened by the fugu who had escaped. The two supported each other as they walked into the castle. Although the road was long, they did not stop there. At the same time, Dake had already reached the third floor from the second floor. During this time, he had gained a lot by relying on the little devil and Ibuchan, but he did not encounter any more hidden ghosts, and only gained a lot of credits. On the first-year Aristocratic Academy's ranking list, his ranking began to rise steadily. This undoubtedly attracted the attention of White and Luo Boat. White immediately felt uneasy and rushed up to the third floor from the second floor. The ghosts on the third floor were generally stronger than those on the second floor, but they were still limited to the first tier of 1 to 3 stars. However, the 1-star salted fish no longer moved alone, and the 3-star ones had also increased in number. Dark had even seen a large group of specters roaming the corridors, draped in sheets. Considering the limited number of cards he had, Dake did not rashly provoke them. Instead, he took a detour and quietly crept up to the 4th floor. After going through the trial on the 2nd floor, Dake more or less understood the movement patterns of these ghosts. Thus, he combined the number and types of cards he had and formulated a new strategy. He was prepared for a big wave. Starting from the 4th floor of the castle, powerful 4-star ghosts began to appear. The 2-star and 3-star ghosts also began to form groups. From time to time, he could see students being chased around by groups of ghosts. Yes, just like now. Hearing the sound of a large number of ghosts rapidly approaching, Dake immediately hid in a small path. Immediately after, he saw a somewhat familiar upperclassman of the aristocratic academy running past, followed by a group of mummies. The mummies moved a little slower than normal people, but there was a witch riding a broom behind them, constantly casting spells to increase their speed. When the upperclassman ran past with the group of mummies like a train, Dake came out of the small path and quietly wiped his sweat. Then he began to familiarize himself with the 4th floor of the castle. About 15 minutes later, Dake found an empty classroom in the corner of the 4th floor. It did not even have a desk or a chair. After confirming that there were no hidden ghosts in the classroom, Dake summoned Little Fiend and patted its cheek, solemnly saying, "I'm counting on you." Little Fiend was as sad as an old general about to rush to the battlefield. It said weakly, "No, can I change to another beast? Little demon beasts aren't of much use." Dake, it's not good to belittle yourself. Believe in yourself, you are the strongest. Little Fiend, all right. Then Little Fiend flew out of the classroom, flying towards a group of zombies that it had discovered during its inspection. Zombies were even more terrifying than mummies. They either lacked a nose or eyes, or their intestines were exposed and dragged on the ground. Little Fiend grabbed a stone and threw it inside. The group of zombies standing by the window and basking in the moonlight all turned, their deep eyes staring at Little Fiend. Thus, a great battle began. Just a dozen or so zombies were not enough to satisfy Little Fiend's appetite. It continued to fly to its next destination, cleanly seducing a group of jack-o'-lantern swordsmen, and then summoned a group of red hat goblins. At this time, Dake was quietly waiting in the classroom. He used his fingers to rub little Ivan's belly. After replenishing his mana, he summoned it. Save! X13 accompanied by a gust of wind, Little Fiend charged into the classroom. The jack-o'-lantern swordsman closest to it slashed at it, almost chopping its head in half. "It's here." Dake's eyes focused and took out Bliss 3. Chapter 97. The entrance of the Jack Pumpkin executioners filled the empty classroom with a bit of liveliness. Dake stood by the window in the back row, leaving an escape route. The Bliss 3, in his hand, glowed faintly. Little Devil saved 13 people in 1 second, but in reality, it didn't charge towards Dake. Instead, it flew straight towards the window opposite the door, somersaulting in the air and rushing out of the window. The Jack Pumpkin executioner who chased after it crashed into the window with a bang. Half of his body was exposed, and he almost fell down. The few Jack Pumpkin executioners behind him also failed to break and crashed into each other with a paw. Little Devil flapped its wings outside the window and turned around to laugh. However, as soon as it started laughing, one of the Jack Pumpkin executioners threw his small wooden axe with all his might. Little Devil screamed and hurriedly dodged, but the tip of its wing was still grazed. Immediately, tears streamed down its face. It didn't dare to make any more waves. It maintained its distance and dodged left and right, continuing to attract the attention of the ghosts. Then, the red hat goblins and the zombies with broken limbs all squeezed in from the front door. In a situation where they couldn't touch Little Devil, the ghosts finally discovered Dake at the window in the back row and changed their target one after another. Remember the website, MVIP, can't you? 6. The Red Hat Goblins were the fastest and nimble. They screamed and swarmed forward. The Jack Pumpkin executioners and soldiers also fanned out and surrounded Dake, forcing him into a corner. It's about time. Seeing that the classroom was already filled with ghosts, Dake immediately raised Bliss 3. Just like the Statue of Liberty raising a torch, Bliss 3 shone brightly. Whether it was the ghosts, the walls, the floor, or the ceiling, everything was covered in a layer of ambiguous pink. All the ghosts under Bliss 3's illumination instantly froze. However, their underdeveloped brains didn't seem to be able to understand Bliss very well. Only some of the goblins made strange movements. Ivan, who was beside Dake's feet, became the target of Bliss 3's gaze. The moonlight from outside the window gathered slightly, and the Bliss emblem appeared on Ivan's forehead. Dake didn't wait for him to successfully evolve. Instead, he picked it up from the ground and tossed it into the horde of ghosts. Ivan was unlucky. While the ghosts were distracted, Dark slid from the window to the classroom door in an extremely comical manner. Then he dashed out of the door. Bang! The moment the door closed, from within came Moon Ibu's evolved meows, as well as the screams of Jack Pumpkin and Red Hat Goblin, as well as the helpless rage of the zombies. Through the window, he could see a black light coming out of the classroom. Inside the classroom, an extremely evil and terrifying black wave instantly erupted. Ultimate skill, Evil Wave, Wave of Evil, releases a terrifying aura filled with malice from the body to kill the opponent. Sometimes it will cause the opponent to cower. Jack Pumpkin Swordsmen are 2 stars, Red Hat Goblins are 2 stars, and Zombies are 2 stars. A group of about 12 to 15 people, and a single person is worth 20 credits. I can earn about 720 to 900 credits in one go, which is equivalent to a week's worth of hard work under normal circumstances. Bliss 3 has a cooldown of 90 minutes, so we can do 2 more rounds before the dance party ends. And from the looks of it, a mere 2-star ghost isn't enough to satisfy Moon Ibu's appetite. Dake carefully considered whether he should take the risk of climbing the castle in order to maximize his benefits. The door behind him was suddenly slammed open. Moon Ibu made a meow sound and pounced on him, hugging his face and licking it. Okay, be good. Dake helplessly propped up one of its front legs and poked its head inside. He saw dozens of candy, biscuits, and desserts floating in the large classroom. He hurriedly called the little devil to pack them up. His final score was 860. Adding to the credits he had earned earlier, he easily broke the 1,000 mark. Dake got a big bag from somewhere and stuffed all the snacks inside. Then, like Santa Claus, he carried the gifts and continued forward. Moon Ibu's status could still be maintained for a long time, so he needed to make full use of it. Those 3-star ghosts weren't Moon Ibu's match at all. A shadow ball was an enemy, and if he didn't have enough magic, he just had to dive into the moonlight, and there would be another good Ibu. It was just that Moon Ibu really couldn't be controlled. Every time, he would have to wait for the ghosts to pounce on him before he was forced to counterattack. This put Dake in a dangerous situation, painful but happy at the same time. In the end, after Moon Ibu killed a 4-star ghost for the first time, Bliss 3's effect ended. Dake's credits also rose to 1230. Without a doubt, he was at the top of the first grade aristocrat academy, and the second place was Doran, who had lost to him in a duel between classes. Doran was still bragging about being first in class 15 minutes ago. He didn't think that in the blink of an eye, he would be caught up, and in the blink of an eye, the gap between them would be pulled apart. It's Dake, then it's fine. Under the gaze of his friends, Doran casually brushed past it, gritting his teeth in his heart. It was a coincidence. White, who was still on the 3rd floor of the castle, relied on the strength of Troll to be unstoppable. He repeatedly charged through the corridors, quickly harvesting credits. Because of Luoboat's Ratman cyborg pulling monsters, his speed wasn't slow. After an hour and a half of hard work, he relied on steady fighting to earn credits that he himself might not have earned in an entire semester. Now he was ranked 2nd in the 1st grade rankings. First place was a student from the Magic Institute. Smart people could always think of all kinds of ways to earn more. It wasn't strange for the Magic Institute to be ranked first. Although White was somewhat unwilling, every time he opened the First Grade Aristocrat Academy's rankings, his mood would be at ease. But this time his eyelids suddenly jumped. Dake, who was originally at the bottom of the rankings, had actually shot up to first place. And his total credits were actually only a little less than his own. Turning back to look, sure enough, Dake was ranked third in the first grade rankings. What did he do? White suddenly roared. Fortunately, after that, Dake's credits slowed down, allowing him to regain his calm. But with a large number of hunts, the number of ghosts on the second and third floors had gradually decreased. In a situation where he hadn't encountered a single ghost for a few minutes, White had no choice but to take the risk and go up to the fourth floor in order to obtain more credits. At this time, Dake had already reached the fifth floor. There were more 4-star ghosts on the fifth floor, as well as hidden 5-star ghosts. Most of the third-grade students were gathered on the fifth floor. Dake's goal this time was to trigger the hidden ghosts. During Bliss 3's cooldown, he would rely on Kettle to kill as many bosses as possible and obtain the core materials. But not long after he walked on the fifth floor, he suddenly discovered that there was an additional bear behind him. Chapter 98. The red panda followed behind him stealthily. When he abruptly turned his head, Little Bear immediately hid in a small path at the side. But with its short legs, it couldn't run very fast. It looked very funny. It's a person. Dake complained silently. It was most likely someone wearing a bear-skin suit. He didn't know if it was a first-year or second-year student. But judging from its height, it shouldn't be too old. Stop following me, Dake said from afar. Then he turned around and continued walking. However, after taking a few steps, the sound of footsteps came from behind him again. He couldn't help but frown. He turned around and asked, "So, is there a reason why you're following me?" The little bear froze. Then it suddenly raised its hand and cried, "Wah!" Dake, "How old are you?" Little bear, 11. Dake, Little bear. Squinting eyes face, Dake's face darkened. He crossed his arms and said, 11. So are you Anna or Enchi? Little bear, Anna. Dake, Enchi. Little bear, Anna. Dake, forget it. Where's your sister? Enchi, the third princess, hopped over to Dake and said pretentiously, "Trick or treat." Dake then threw the bag of candy he was carrying to her. Enchi caught it instinctively. Her hands sank and it almost slipped. "What's this?" Dark revealed a trace of a smile. "The candy you wanted. Okay, this bag of candy is yours now. Go play with your own things. Don't cause trouble for me." Dake was naturally very happy to get rid of the annoying candy. In the royal kingdom, he was the son of a duke and had known the 3 princesses since he was young. Just like how little kids like to run around behind their big sisters, Dake used to stick to Princess Elisha when he was young, but that was a long time ago. After all, they were at least 6 years apart. When Dake was just starting to understand things, the first princess was already busy with her studies. After that, the ones who played with him were the twin princesses who were 1 year younger. Because the second princess Anna was born with abundant magic power, her magic power suddenly went out of control, causing the toys around her to float up and hit Dake's head. Hence, Dake gave her the nickname Old Witch. After that, there was nothing after that. The relationship between Dake and Anna became very bad, and so did the relationship with Enchi. When they were about 7 years old, they had a complete falling out. After that, Dake became more and more naughty, and the princesses became more and more naughty. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. They didn't expect to meet again outside of public places in the corridor of the Shung Malian castle. Dake sighed. Enchi had already put the candy bag on the ground, and was excitedly untying the rope to check it. "Hey Dake," Enchi suddenly said. Dake replied casually, "Yes." Enchi said again, "How do you have so much candy? I'll follow you and help you pick up the candy, okay?" Dake said, "No." Enchi said excitedly, "Then it's a deal." Dake ignored her. While she was indulging in the magical candy, he took a step forward and ran away quickly. The teddy bear bag was clumsy to begin with, and she wanted to chase after the despicable Dake when she saw him running away. However, she accidentally kicked the candy bag to the ground, and a large amount of candy fell and rolled all over the ground. An ominous aura suddenly appeared in the air. Dake, who had just run a short distance, suddenly stopped and listened carefully. He heard a voice from afar. The voice was getting closer and clearer. "Where's my teddy bear? Did anyone see my teddy bear?" Dark turned his head abruptly, only to see an oversized ragdoll bear poking out half of its body from the other side of the pitch-black corridor. The teddy bear was 3 meters tall, and its button-like eyes were emitting a ghostly green soul fire. Its skin was pieced together with pieces of cloth of various colors, and a dark aura was constantly seeping out from the seams. If that was all, it wouldn't be too scary. However, half of its body was a pale skeleton with bits of skin and flesh hanging on it. "Did you see my teddy bear?" The hoarse voice seemed to drill into one's bones, making one tremble uncontrollably. "Huh?" Somewhere in the castle, Professor Lily Laplace was lying on the sofa and blowing bubbles. Suddenly, he jumped up like a fish. "No way? That kind of mechanism can be triggered?" Professor Lily instantly woke up and quickly covered herself with a card. Her whole body suddenly became illusory. Then, the dragonfly wings on her back flapped, and she flew directly through the wall to the 5th floor of the castle. She wasn't panicking, but curious. Who's so lucky to be able to trigger this? Ooh. When Angie turned around, she quickly covered her mouth with her hand. A little spirit that looked like a griffin poked its head out of the gap in her little bear leather case. However, Angie rolled her eyes and stuffed the elf sent by Erdei's principal back into the bag. Then she screamed in panic. In short, it was a great dolphin sound. However, as soon as she screamed, she saw a flash in the corner of her eyes. The golden-haired young man in luxurious clothes was completely different from what she remembered. He had already swept past her and rushed toward the terrifying zombie teddy bear without any fear. "I've searched high and low for it, only to find it by chance." Dake suppressed the joy in his heart. A magic elf card appeared between his 2 fingers. He still had some confidence in dealing with this kind of hidden monster that appeared alone. However, from the sound of the zombie teddy bear, it seemed to be coming for Anchi. Could it be that the mechanism that triggered it was the teddy bear and the candy? Or was it the teddy bear scattering the candy on the ground incident? He couldn't figure it out for the time being. But was it important? It wasn't important. Dark stopped abruptly. The magic elf card between his 2 fingers swiped across his chest. Magic summoning. A little tortoise-like magic elf appeared between the man and the bear. Anchi, who had stopped screaming, looked at the little tortoise with a red shell and yellow skin. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "Is this Dake's magic elf? Why does it look so lame?" At the same time, the griffin-like elf squeezed out from between her fingers again. However, it blinked and suddenly stopped moving. A little elf popped its head out from the ceiling like a ghost and blinked at it. "Found it, my little bear." The zombie teddy bear ignored Hohu and Dake. It stared at the 3rd princess in the teddy bear costume with shining eyes. It started running without warning. Its pale skeleton was surrounded by a black aura. It looked ferocious and evil. Oh. Chapter 99. The hidden monster on the 5th floor of the castle should be at least a 5-star monster, right? Dake wasn't a brave and fearless person. His calmness was based on his confidence in his magic guide sprite. No matter if it was a 5-star, 6-star, or 7-star monster, he had the power to fight. Kettle Kettle's small body contained an unbelievable amount of power. Even though it had many weaknesses, as long as it was used well, it would be invincible. Let's test the strength of a 5-star hidden monster first. Dake took out 2 other cards from his card pack, but he wasn't in a hurry to summon them. Ba ba ba. In order to attract the attention of the zombie ragdoll bear, Kettle tried its best to provoke it. Website. https://m. Vipcanchu. VIP. However, its body was too small. The zombie ragdoll bear didn't care about it at all, only dashing forward with large steps. With just a single step, he actually leaped over its head. Dake's face darkened, and he hurriedly summoned illusory magical beast, Ibu. Ibu turned solid in the air and barked at it. This barking was clearly more effective than Kettle Kettle's insect chirping. The zombie ragdoll bear stopped and raised its fan-sized paw to slap Ibu. If this slap landed, Ibu would definitely turn into light. Luckily, it was nimble enough to dodge it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Dake counted down the cooldown of a normal summoning spell and immediately started chanting. Another 5 seconds later, Pride 2 was instantly activated, and a dark golden light shot towards Ibu. Ibu, who had successfully lured the zombie ragdoll bear, suddenly had a change in his expression. Although there were no other changes to its appearance other than the addition of a crest on its head, its inner qualities were completely different. Eye of the Circle. Dake gave the command without hesitation. Evie's eyes suddenly lit up with a dark golden light. A kind of condescending arrogance was transmitted into the heart of the zombie ragdoll bear through their eyes. In that instant, even a 5-star monster like the zombie ragdoll bear couldn't avoid Ibu's Eye of the Circle. That arrogance, as if it was sitting on the stars and looking down on the world, made the zombie ragdoll bear feel extremely defeated. In an instant it lost all hope of attacking. Ivan landed on the ground, panting slightly. However, the effects of circular pupil didn't last for long. After the zombie ragdoll bear regained its senses, it suddenly flew into a rage out of humiliation. It opened its mouth and roared angrily. It finally gave up on its little bear and set its sights on Ivan, who had given it endless humiliation. This was obviously what Dake wanted to see. Immediately after, the zombie ragdoll bear raised its right claw and clawed at the left chest of the skeleton, pulling out the beating black heart from the chest. Then, under Dake's perplexed gaze, it turned its heart into a bomb and threw it at Ivan. Ultimate skill, Black Heart Bomb. Boom. In the dim corridor, the sound of the explosion echoed for a long time. The zombie ragdoll bear patted its chest and roared excitedly. However, after the dust settled, what appeared in front of them was a slightly weakened Kettle. Clearly, the Black Heart Bomb's attack power had exceeded Kettle's defense. This zombie ragdoll bear belonged to the top category even among the 5-star ghosts. Ivan, who appeared behind Kettle, patted its chest. Its face twitched slightly. It had just used imitation, but the imitation skill required it to dig out its heart to use. This was really difficult for Qianghu. Easy. Kettle provoked it again. This time, it finally succeeded in attracting the zombie ragdoll bear's aggro. The zombie ragdoll bear's attention was completely focused on Kettle. Dake finally let out a sigh of relief. It's done. In his opinion, Kettle's biggest weakness was its small size and slow speed. Even if it was summoned in the arena, the opponent could ignore it. However, once the opponent stopped ignoring it, it would be completely finished. The zombie ragdoll bear in front of them was no doubt a perfect example. When it raged and rushed towards Kettle immediately used equal share, reducing the zombie ragdoll bear's strength by half. The attack, which had originally exceeded his defensive capabilities, suddenly became neither painful nor itchy. The zombie ragdoll bear's subsequent full stomp was completely like a kitten stomping on milk. After withstanding the stomp, Kettle immediately used Power Trick to exchange its own defense and attack power. Attack, 200 defense. With a full 2200 attack power, Kettle had a counterattack ability that surpassed that of a 3-star card. Its tentacles curled into a fist, and it smashed the zombie ragdoll bear's left leg. Crack. The pale white bone leg immediately cracked like glass. The bones that were already rotten could no longer support the zombie ragdoll bear's cumbersome body. It was instantly crushed. Without its left leg, the zombie ragdoll bear fell down with a roar. Ivan pounced over like a gust of wind, biting down on that button-like eye that was still burning with soul fire. Then he raised his head and tore it off. The zombie ragdoll bear, which had lost its only eye, was no longer able to cause any trouble. 2 minutes later, this 5-star hidden ghost was completely eliminated. Credits plus 100, Ibu-chan leaped up and caught the gift box with her mouth. She then delivered it to Dark. Dake took the gift box and patted its head. Ibu-chan turned its head away arrogantly. Squeak. What is this? Dake opened the gift box and saw a black button. It reminded him of the button eyes of the zombie ragdoll bear. No matter what, since it's an item dropped by a 5-star hidden spirit, it must be something extraordinary. Dake carefully put it into the interlayer of his card bag before turning around. She happened to see Little Bear sneaking away with the bag of candy on his back. Dark had a smile on his face. When he rushed past Enchi just now, he had actually noticed the little griffin sprite. Since she was protected by Professor Erdei's sprite, there was no need to worry about her safety. Only after Angie thought that she had slipped away without anyone noticing did Dark continue on his way. He specifically targeted the 4-star ghosts that were alone. While accumulating points, he also relied on high-intensity battles to gain combat experience. For the junior students, the masquerade ball had a lot of extra value. In short, he gained a lot. Professor Lily continued to observe Dake for a while before sneaking back. The masquerade ball continued. Apart from the squid and the pufferfish, the other members of the church's operation was quite smooth. There were already a few couples who had disappeared without a trace. Chapter 100. At 9 o'clock sharp, the bell rang. Dake was waiting in an empty classroom on the 5th floor of the castle. After nearly an hour of hunting, he was quite familiar with the distribution of ghosts in this small area. There weren't many 4-star ghosts. There were still 4 waves of 3-star ghosts left. These 4 waves of ghosts were the lake specter that could spit out frost wind, the lizard assassin that was proficient in the toxic dragon drill, the banshee that was good at screaming, and the minotaur dwarf that wielded a small axe. The most troublesome one was undoubtedly the lake specter. In view of the fact that little fiend might not be able to fly due to the frost wind, Dake only let it lure the other 3 waves. And he himself was still in the classroom, replenishing Ivan's magic while waiting. Speaking of replenishing magic, with the normal level of a first-year student, their magic reserves at this point in time would most likely be depleted. Remember the website, MVIP, can't you? VIP only those with deep magic like Dake and White, and those with good magic management like AI Ma and Saraswati still had a lot of magic left. So at this point in time, the rankings were basically fixed. For example, in the first year's Noble Academy rankings, Dake was already at the top of the list. And in the first year's overall rankings, he had already climbed to 2nd place. The originally first-place students of the magic school were gradually falling behind due to their lack of magic management ability, and were even overtaken by AI Ma, Sarah, and the others. Although Dake didn't care about these things, he would occasionally open the rankings to look at Deanna and Luoxi's rankings, as well as take a look at Panduola's ranking. Among them, Deanna was getting higher and higher in the first year's Noble Academy rankings, but Luoxi had already fallen out of the rankings. As for Panduola, she had already surpassed the grade rankings, and was competing with the 5th and 6th year students for the overall championship. The 12th place in the overall rankings were almost the top 12 of the 6 grades in the Shungmalian Academy. She was currently ranked 3rd. One had to know that she was only halfway through her academy career. It's here. The cold wind blowing in through the window made Dake realize that the little devil had provoked a ghost that it shouldn't have. He summoned Ivan, this time hiding behind the curtains at the back of the classroom. Save X12 this time. The little demon beast also screamed and rushed into the classroom like last time. But before Lifestealer could finish his sentence, one of his wings was blown away by the frosty wind, and white frost appeared on it. Its expression froze, and its flying speed slowed down. Then, the lizard man assassin nimbly rushed in, picked up a knife made from a horn, and forcefully stabbed the back of the little fiend magical beast. The little demonic beast let out a blood-curdling scream as its potential erupted. It leaped forward a few more meters, and finally arrived in front of the window. However, as soon as it climbed up the window, a pile of small axes suddenly flew over from behind. It was so scared that it slid over the wall. Countless small axes flew over its head and disappeared into the night sky. The banshee's howl resounded throughout the classroom, causing dust to fall from the sky. This time, Dake didn't even have a chance to escape the classroom. He could only brace himself and use Bliss 3, and then use Precise Throw to throw Ivan into the midst of the ghosts. But this time, the effects of Bliss 3 were better than last time. No matter if it was the Snow Lady or the Banshee, they all stopped attacking because of this and let out frequent cries. Moon Ivan, who had completed his evolution in the sky, instantly exploded when he found his master. Things darker than darkness, things darker than night, submerged in the flow of time. All foolish things that obstruct his path will be equally destroyed. Evil Wave. Lake Spirit 3-star, Lizard Man Assassin 3-star, Shrieking Banshee 3-star, Minotaur Dwarf 3-star. A total of 76, 30 credits per individual, 2,280 credits in one go, more than double. But now it seems that 3-star is Moon Ivan's limit. Any more and he'll be in danger. And with the number of ghosts decreasing, it'll be hard to find a suitable place to wipe them out at 10:30. Even though it's only a little over 9, it seems that today's harvest is more or less enough. Dake hid behind the curtains and quickly calculated. Before this, his new credits had barely broken through 2,000. After this wave, he should have 4,300 credits. If he used the remaining time of Bliss 3 quickly, he could go even higher. Because of his previous experience, this time, he left the little fiend magical beast to collect the candy while he quickly rushed to the next point. He already knew the location of the remaining 4-star ghosts like the back of his hand. It's time to harvest another wave. Only when his new credits reached 4,500 did Dake put the degenerated little Ivan back into the magic card. As the hexagram magic replenishing formation was completed, he gently rubbed Ivan's little belly and quickly replenished its magic. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Next, he wanted to continue to the higher floors, step on the mountains of corpses and seas of blood that the upperclassmen had cleared, and see the wider world and the distance. There was actually another trick to deal with the ghosts. If he didn't provoke them and just walked past them, he just needed to give them some candy, and they wouldn't be attacked for the time being. Dake scattered candy all the way from the 5th floor to the 6th floor, then to the 7th floor, and finally to the 8th floor. At this point, he was already extremely cautious, and basically only walked to places with large amounts of candy. The upperclassmen didn't seem to understand the principle of every grain is hard work, and scattered the candy all over the floor instead of picking it up. Left with no choice, the hard-working and honest Dake could only open the gunny sack and enjoy the feeling of Mario picking up gold coins. As the candy was stuffed to the brim, Dake couldn't even carry it anymore and could only put it on the ground and drag it along. At around 9:30, the little fiend magical beast that was scouting ahead suddenly screamed and ran back. Dake's expression froze as he saw a large group of bats following behind the little fiend magical beast and swarming over. He hurriedly dragged the bag of candy to the small path by the wall and waited for the little fiend magical beast to charge past with the group of bats before finding an opportunity to put it back into the school card and release it. "What's going on?" Dake asked in a small voice. The little fiend magical beast was out of breath as it said, "It's been summoned, a vampire magical beast." In the middle of the 8th floor of the castle, a few upperclassmen excitedly surrounded the 8th floor's hidden boss, the vampire Earl. In order to trigger it, this group of upperclassmen worked hard for an entire night, triggering and killing all 8 hidden ghosts in the 8 corners of the 8th floor. Only then did they successfully obtain 8 summoning stones and summon the vampire Earl from the blood altar. As the second most famous boss-level ghost in the Masquerade Ball, the vampire Earl not only provided a large amount of academic credits as a reward, but according to the usual practice, there was also a chance to drop related core materials. For example, vampire fangs. Chapter 101. Of course, what the monster would drop depended on what the professors put inside. Dake was like a cat that smelled fish. He put the big bag of candy in one of the classrooms and quietly went there. It wasn't that he wanted to snatch the boss, but he just wanted to see what the vampire Earl would drop. If it was a vampire fang, he might find a way to negotiate in exchange for it. The so-called vampire fangs were an alchemy product that sealed the power of vampires in their fangs. When the vampire sucked the blood of its prey, it would pierce its fang into the blood vessels of its prey. In order to make it easier to suck the blood, they would inject a hormone that would make the prey calm down. If it was a noble pureblood, The hormone would also contain magic elements that would make the prey fall into a state of bliss and become the most loyal captive of the vampire. This was the so-called embrace. The closer the vampire's bloodline was to the ancestor, the better the effect of the fang. Remember, https://mfipcanshu. Vip in the last era, vampire fang was not rare. After all, vampires had to change their fangs every 100 years. But with the extinction of the demon race, vampire fang became a rare item. Especially since the number of pure-blood vampires was small. The ones that could be passed down were even fewer. According to Dake's understanding, vampire fang was a tool that could transform fury into bliss. The premise was that the original owner had enough pure vampire blood, so it was not a necessity, but a key suppressor and transformation agent. With a trace of hope, he continued to move forward. Dake found that more and more senior students were gathering. The vampire earl's aura was too strong when it was born. Those who were sensitive enough to sense magic would immediately be attracted. In the blink of an eye, around the blood altar in the center of the 8th floor, there were more than 10 senior students. However, everyone abided by the unwritten rules and only watched from the sidelines without taking any action. Only when the senior students who had successfully summoned the vampire count were in danger or failed in their crusade against the boss would they intervene. At that time, the boss would become an ownerless item and would belong to whoever grabbed it. Dake, who arrived after them, was finally able to witness the power of the upper-grade students. They were accompanied by magic guide fairies, and all of them were at the 2nd tier or higher. Just from their outward appearances, one could see that they were all extremely powerful. There were even many magic elves that were exclusive elves that had never been heard of before. Dake put the little fiend back into the school card and carefully followed behind the upperclassmen. Through the gaps between people, he could clearly see the vampire count on the blood altar. No wonder the little evil magical beast said that it was a blood-sucking magical beast. It really does look like one. But the image of vampire nobles seems to be like this. Fresh blood was still gushing out from the altar. Blood is power. Above the rolling blood spring, the pale vampire count was wearing a dark red blood cloak. He opened his arms and roared. Above its head, a sea of blood was churning, and there were swarms of bats. One after another, blood fiends were born from the blood and fearlessly pounced on the senior students who had summoned them. There were a total of 5 senior students, but because they were not wearing school uniforms, it was impossible to tell their grades. But they were all abnormally powerful. The 5 senior students each stood in a corner. Every one of them was controlling at least 3 magic guide fairies. The blood fiends that were born from the sea of blood were all ferocious beasts that were at least 6-star. But the 5 senior students were still steadily and quickly eliminating the blood fiends. They were neither too fast nor too slow, and tried to use this method to reduce the vampire count's power. Blood was the source of its power. When the sea of blood that gave birth to the blood fiends completely dried up, it would be the time for the vampire count to meet its end. Otherwise, it was very likely that it would continue to be reborn. Every bat that flew out was one of its clones. After it was reborn, it would appear in any corner of the castle. So before the sea of blood was completely purified, it could not be killed. Even Dake could understand this kind of logic, so there was no reason for the upper grade students not to understand. Therefore, after 2 or 3 minutes, more and more students realized that the crusade against the vampire count was going to be an extremely boring and long affair. So while there were people coming, there were also people leaving. Only Dake was still watching with great interest. Whether it was the blood fiends that were born from the sea of blood, or the strength that the 5 people showed when eliminating the blood fiends, or even the vampire count's pale face that was gradually losing blood in his cold eyes, he was watching with great interest. Sure enough, when the blood fountain no longer gushed out, the sea of blood above the vampire count's head was about to dry up. Something strange happened. A dignified vampire count had actually self-destructed without any dignity. The waves of blood produced by the explosion engulfed the magic guide fairies. The 5 senior students used all kinds of methods, and after paying a certain price, they were able to perfectly avoid the damage caused by the self-destruction. However, the crusade against the boss that they had planned for the whole night fell short of success. At the beginning of the summoning, they did not know that tonight's 8-star hidden boss would be the vampire count, so they released a large number of bats at the beginning. And those bats became a hidden danger. And now it really exploded. No one would stop attacking the vampire count just because they were the ones who summoned it. This time, it was the real deal. Whoever managed to snatch it would own it. No matter how angry and helpless the 5 senior students were, they had successfully started a great era of treasure hunting. Whoever could find the bat that the vampire count was reborn with would be able to obtain the vampire's treasure. The masquerade ball that was gradually coming to an end became interesting once again. Dake released the little demon beast again, and trotted in the direction where the bat flew. Although he did not think that he would be the lucky one, who did not have a spirit of treasure hunting. The news spread like the wind. The junior students who had stopped hunting because of the lack of magic also started to move again. The whole castle was revitalized because of this. The students talked about the contributions of the 5 senior students, and excitedly searched every corner of the castle. White Gouda opened the ranking list and saw that Dake Dimung suddenly rose to the first-year ranking list more than half an hour ago. She gritted her teeth and joined the treasure hunting army. Anna and Luosi, Tiger Cub and Bear Cub. Even the members of the church were excited. The more scattered the students were, the more chances they had. Squid and Blowfish continued to fight towards their goal. Chapter 102. Everything was carried out in the midst of excited shouts. Everything was carried out in silence. Countless bats hiding in the corners of the castle became the object of the students' thirsty search. Whether it was the bats released by the vampire count, or the bats that originally existed in the castle, even the little demonic beasts that looked like bats almost became targets of attack. Dake took out the candy bag from the classroom again, and searched in the direction where the bats flew. As the candy in the candy bag became less and less, he also succeeded in finding a few bats. However, after the bats were exterminated, nothing dropped. It seems that my luck isn't as good as I thought. At about 10 o'clock, Dake returned from the 8th floor to the 7th floor. First URL. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. Then at 10:20, he returned from the 7th floor to the 6th floor. At 10:40, he had returned to the 5th floor. It had been nearly an hour since the vampire count's self-destruction, but it seemed that there was no news of anyone finding the special bat. This was actually very difficult to understand under the fanatical search of the students. It couldn't have escaped into some secret passage, right? Dake couldn't help but mutter. The church's actions were orderly, except for Squid and Blowfish who were still wandering around. The other 14 members of the church had a harvest. Although not everyone could successfully complete the target of capturing 3 couples, in fact, this target itself was a kind of insurance. This was because the living sacrifices that the saints had paid their respects to only needed 7 couples. The others were just spare tires in case of an emergency. Human feelings were very subtle and difficult to understand. No one knew if 2 people who were originally sincere would suddenly become not so sincere at a certain juncture. Or could it be that the seemingly sincere feelings were actually just an act to pass off as genuine? The members of the church couldn't afford to gamble. So they formulated a target of more than 3 times, trying to reduce the probability of failure through quantity. The appearance of the vampire's treasure brought them convenience, but also trouble. People began to appear at the entrance of the secret passages. But they successfully avoided those risks and finally sent the captured couples to the temple. At 11 o'clock sharp, except for Squid and Blowfish, all the members had returned to the temple. A total of 16 couples were captured, which was more than twice the number of the actual target. These couples were all tied together back to back. Their card packs were all taken away, and the branch cards that would expose their location were all thrown out of the secret passage. The church did not gag their mouths, but it seemed that they had found that cursing was of no use, and the people who were shouting were gone. There were a total of 16 couples, 32 people. They were temporarily stuffed in the corner of the temple. They could see the snow-white and delicate statue of the goddess in the temple. Many people were attracted by the statue. It was as if their souls had been sucked away, and they became silent. If only that statue existed here, it would more or less give people a sense of holiness. However, after the members of the order took off their black robes, the marine product leather sheath that was revealed was too strange. There was a sense of evil everywhere. A sober girl couldn't help but ask the only female in the church, Miss Heischen. She had heard Miss Heischen's voice before. May I ask, how will you deal with us? You will become a living sacrifice. Miss Heischen's voice had changed, and it was as creepy as an old witch. But the girl suddenly widened her eyes. Betty, it's really you. Who is Betty? You must have mistaken me for someone else, Miss Heischen said indifferently. The girl named Jenny broke down on the spot. Betty, you can't do this to me. We are friends. Miss Heischen still said indifferently. Yes, there are women in this world who will steal their best friend's man. Miss Jenny's expression froze. After a long time, she squeezed out a sentence. He also likes me. Yes. Miss Heischen let out a creepy laugh. So I caught all of you. Hee, it's all over, Jenny. No. Outside the secret passage. Squid and Blowfish, who had experienced many failures, were completely red-eyed. Because they couldn't catch even a single couple, they didn't have the face to return to the temple. So even though it was the appointed time, they were still wandering outside. They looked very much like a middle-aged man who was sitting in the park and pretending that he still had a job after being fired. Suddenly, Squid grabbed Blowfish and pulled him into a corner. While Blowfish was puzzled, two first-year students appeared outside the secret passage. After White brought Luoboat here, she seemed to have made a great decision and told her secret. It's like this, actually. I have been hiding something from you. Luoboat was stunned for a moment, but then he said excitedly, I know, and I have also been hiding something from you. What? White was dumbfounded. I knew it. We're best friends. How could you hide it from me all this time? Robert continued to blabber on. Tell me. Let's tell you together. White. Oh, why don't you go first? Luoboat. Of course you go first. My secret is based on your secret. White said helplessly. Then I'll go first. Actually, I found a secret passage here. Look, no one has found that special bat after so long, so I suspect it went into the secret passage. Luoboat waited for a while and couldn't help but frown. It's just a secret passage? White was surprised. What do you mean it's just a secret passage? That's my biggest secret. Anyway, I said it, what about you? Luoboat. Well, actually I don't have any secrets. White. Forget it. Do you think we should go look in the secret passage? I really want to surpass Dake. Luoboat. Of course I will help you. Squid, who was hiding in the corner, suddenly whispered to Pufferfish. Don't you think they are a good match? Pufferfish was confused. What do you mean? Squid's voice was gloomy and happy. Let's go catch them. They must have a great relationship. A wisp of smoke quietly spread out. White and Luoboat were still talking. They were so focused on the word secret that they didn't notice anything unusual. They inhaled the wisp of smoke. 10 seconds later, Luoboat suddenly leaned against the wall and asked blankly, What's wrong? I feel a bit dizzy. White rubbed his head and said, I feel a bit dizzy too. Is it because I'm too tired? Chapter 103. Looks like it's working. They don't seem to have noticed that this is the hypnotic effect of the goodnight potion. Their first years after all. The first years are awesome. Seeing that White and Luoboat had really won, Cuttlefish and Blowfish almost burst into tears. However, after experiencing many failures, they had also grown. Cuttlefish successfully suppressed the urge to rush out and grabbed Blowfish. No, we have to be more careful. We can't fail at the last hurdle. Then he took out a new magic elf card from his card bag and said in a sinister voice, The first years don't have the consciousness to hide cards on their bodies. As long as we take away their card bags, they'll be lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Well said, I'll do it too. Blowfish took a step back and also took out a magic elf card. Immediately after, two small magic elves drilled out of their magic cards. Then they seized the opportunity and suddenly shot out. Remember the website, Vip can't you? 6 Cuttlefish's magic elf was a water monkey, while Blowfish's was a fat rat. The two magic elves were extremely fast. When they suddenly burst out, it was difficult to see with the naked eye. Caught off guard, Luoboat did not have time to react. The card bag hanging on his waist was cut off by the water monkey's fingernails, and instantly scooped it away. The fat rat did the same, but White suddenly took a step back. The fat rat's fingernails did not cut the belt. Instead, it cut a huge hole in the card bag. Victor's magic card fell out with a clatter. Among them were the Academy cards, Magical Beast, Stag, Troll, and a few other newly made magic cards. The moment the cards fell, White's mind instantly cleared and he pounced on the troll, that flew out. However, a black shadow suddenly flashed in front of him and shot the troll away. Seeing that the operation had failed, Blowfish had already rushed out with his other magic elf, the Blowfish Man. The Blowfish Man, with two hairy legs, shot out burrs from its body, preventing White from picking up the card. "Who, it's you again." White's gaze swept past the blowfish and instantly fixed on the squid who had just walked out from the corner. "So what if it's me?" The squid slowly walked out, followed by the huge three-eyed squid. Werther felt a fury he had never felt before. "Don't you forget who was the one who let you go?" the squid said gloomily. "Of course I remember. I remember every bruise on my body. Even if you let me go in order to avoid confinement, you can't wash away the humiliation you gave me. Son of the brave, you will fall into the abyss with your followers." White's eyes flashed and he couldn't help but think of Into the Abyss. He clasped his hands behind his back, and Forbidden Love slipped out from the hidden compartment in his sleeves. Seeing that the squid was getting closer and closer, he swung Taboo Love in front of him and roared, "The abyss does not welcome you." The pink mist that drilled out of Taboo Love condensed into the outline of a woman, and in an instant, she pounced on the huge three-eyed squid. As the three eyes of the three-eyed squid turned into the shape of Heartsuit, White was overjoyed. The squid himself didn't notice it at all. It wasn't until the three-eyed squid that originally belonged to him used its tentacles to hang him up that his face suddenly changed and he panicked. "Blowfish, save me." White's face showed a happy smile, and he immediately ordered the three-eyed squid to attack another person. He himself took the opportunity to pick up the card. However, as soon as he bent down, dozens of burrs shot out and nailed the ground at his feet. Blowfish turned to look at the squid who was tied up by his magic elf, and couldn't help but curse, "Trash." From the beginning, he followed the squid's lead. To now confirming the fact that the squid was trash, Blowfish had walked a long psychological journey. Almost without any hesitation, he manipulated his pufferman and shot countless burrs at the three-eyed squid. Each of those burrs was filled with black venom, and almost all of them shot into the three-eyed squid's body. The three-eyed squid struggled to run a few steps forward, but the tetrodotoxin in its body erupted. Suddenly, its body stiffened and it vomited a large amount of poisonous ink. No. White didn't expect Seakeet's three-eyed squid to be so trash, and his face suddenly changed. Seakeet, who broke free from the three-eyed squid's bindings, immediately screamed, "Water monkey!" The water monkey with extremely long arms raised its head and sprayed out a stream of water. White quickly raised his arms to block the stream of water, but he was still pushed back by the impact of the stream of water. The magic cards on the ground were also washed away by the water. Luoboat, who had just woken up, subconsciously grabbed a magic card that rushed to his side. He threw the magic card to White without thinking. "White, catch it." White was happy to hear that. He caught it with his hand and suddenly shouted, "Magic summoning." After a few seconds, the light released from the magic card turned into a solid form. A creamy yellow furball fell down. The furball fell to the ground with a plop. It stuck out a very thin pink tongue, subconsciously licked the water on the ground, and made a cute sound. This was the magic fairy that White made on the spot using the materials from the 10-school branch. Poo Rong Rong. No. White and Luoboat's desperate roar came from the corridor again. Dake, who was walking over, vaguely heard some noises. He sniffed with his nose, called the little demon beast, and quickly ran over. But when he arrived, there was only a pool of water and a few magic cards soaked in the water in the passage at the entrance of the secret passage. "Go check it out." Dake didn't walk out so easily. Instead, he sent the little demon beast to check it out as usual. After the little fiend returned, he walked towards the puddle of water and picked up the few magic cards from the water. Magic Beast, Stag, Troll. Mana Recovery Potion X2. There was also a Pu Rong Rong a little further away. There were a total of 5 magic cards. Stag, Troll. Aren't these the magic cards from White Gouda? How did they fall here? Dark followed the trail of water and looked in the direction of the wall. He couldn't help but hesitate. Did he enter the secret passage? Dake began his analysis. Looking at the scattered magic cards, White didn't enter the secret passage willingly. Was he forced to enter? Or has he been caught? He's very vigilant. It shouldn't be that easy to catch him, right? These magic cards probably fell down after a sneak attack. But there's no Luo boat card among them. They're always together. Maybe they still have a fighting chance? In the end, are their opponents ghosts or humans? They can't be forced to a dead end by ghosts, right? So in the end, should I eat this melon or not? Chapter 104. Even though Dake said that he would be a bystander, now was obviously not the time to think about that. He only thought for a moment, then gave the little fiend a look, found the entrance to the secret passage, and injected magic power. As the wall rippled like water, the little fiend plunged its head in. A few seconds later, it poked its head out of the wall again. Safe. Dake flashed and immediately went in. The torches on both sides of the secret passage had already been lit, and this thing could easily expose his whereabouts. But there was no good way at the moment. He glanced at the ground and found that there were still traces of water left in this secret passage. Obviously, someone had entered through here not long ago. He followed the traces of water all the way. Finally, he reached a fork in the road, and the traces of water suddenly disappeared. But after arriving here, Dake was more or less certain that the other party's destination should be that temple. Remember in 1 second. https://mvipcanshu. VIP. He sped up along the path to the temple. Dake soon arrived at the place where he had fought with White, and after another turn, he found that the path leading to the temple was brightly lit. A few bats came out of nowhere and flew into the temple along with the light, and he could vaguely hear some noise. Seems like some kind of gathering. Dake observed for a moment, and chose to take a detour forward. Finally, after a few minutes, he approached the temple. Because he couldn't be sure if someone was hiding outside, Dake didn't get too close, and only stopped at a corner about 10 meters away from the temple to observe. From where he was, he could already see the silhouettes of the people in the temple, which was densely packed. Is it that Marina order? Dake's mind moved slightly, and he realized that White was probably captured and brought here by the order. Although he didn't know much about the order. In fact, as long as he used his brain, he could more or less figure out what this order would do. Worship, sacrifice, or something else. Roar. Suddenly, the roar of a behemoth that seemed to penetrate the entire castle burst out from above. Dark was caught off guard. He quickly covered his ears and retreated. Then the same penetrating dragon's roar resounded through the night sky, startling the students in the castle. Dake didn't know what was going on, but he saw that the people in the temple were also startled, and a few people even rushed out, but retreated after a moment. The roar from above was suddenly cut off, and the surroundings became deathly silent again. Dake stuck to the wall, and held his breath. After a moment, he regained his calmness. Then, he quickly realized that there was no one hiding outside of the temple. As for the beastly roar coming from above, it was very likely that the final boss of the 9th floor of the castle had been summoned. Every year on Halloween, there would be such a routine. This was not strange. Dark sent out the little demon beast to scout the way. After confirming that there was no one hiding outside, he stuck close to the wall and carefully groped his way to the entrance of the shrine. Here the sounds inside, the sound of the temple although it's Dake to the temple, the entrance Dake's SS to the temple, Dake to the marina. He had some guesses about the church's behavior, but he didn't expect them to do this to students. Since Professor Kazair has already investigated, he shouldn't have allowed this to happen. But the truth was right in front of him, and he had to believe it. With a cursory glance, he could see that there were more than 10 pairs of male and female students tied up inside. Dake immediately saw Luoboat, who was the outermost. He was tied up with another girl, and his mouth was stuffed with a rag, but he seemed to be in good condition. His eyes were wide open, and he looked quite imposing. Keat, who was wearing a squid skin, was standing in front of him, her chin pointing at him. Unfortunately, Dake couldn't find White among them. He didn't know if she was tied up in another corner. Apart from Keat, who was in charge of guarding the captives, the other members of the church were busy. They drew extremely complicated magic circuits around the goddess's statue, and placed magic candles with special patterns on the nodes of the circuits. After the setup was completed, a member of the church wearing an eel head walked over, sizing up Luoboat and the girl behind him with interest. She asked curiously, "Are these the couples you caught?" Keat said proudly, "Don't worry, they definitely meet the standards." Miss Heishin nodded slightly. "That's good. After tonight, everything will change." Keat was also excited. "As long as the goddess is resurrected, we will be her most devout followers, and they will sing praises to our names." Miss Heishin smiled. "I don't have such big ambitions. I'll be satisfied if all the heartless people in the world die." Keat was speechless. After a while, a person wearing a Haishing skin appeared in Dake's field of vision. After circling around the couples, he reached down, and a magic card appeared at his fingertips. Magic summon. The last bit of sound from the couples disappeared. It was the silence card. This discovery made Dake even more vigilant. Those who were able to refine the silence card were definitely the cream of the crop among the senior students. It seemed that not all the members of the church were as useless as Keat. Mr. Haishing didn't stop there. He then took out an extremely small bottle. His lips squirmed a few times, and a drop of sparkling and translucent liquid was produced from the bottle. Among the tied couples, one of them seemed to recognize the origin of this drop of liquid, and suddenly struggled and roared. But his voice had already been silenced by the silence card, and not a trace of it could be heard. Mr. Haishing pursed his lips and smiled. "As expected of Antonio, you even recognized the soulless water." That person struggled even more fiercely, but Mr. Haishing then flicked his finger, and that drop of soulless water was shot into that person's forehead. That person stopped struggling in an instant, and his pupils dilated as he lost consciousness. Dake, who was hiding outside, frowned. He realized that he had encountered a blind spot in his knowledge. What exactly was the soulless water? It seemed that he wasn't the only one. Apart from Antonio and the 16 members of the church, the others obviously didn't know what the soulless water was. But this didn't stop them from struggling desperately after seeing what happened to Antonio. A few of them even succeeded in breaking the ropes, and pounced on the members of the church. But without a magic card, they were suppressed again after only 2 minutes. Mr. Haishing dripped the soulless water on their foreheads one by one. As the soulless water seeped into their brains, everyone lost consciousness. Even though Dake wanted to make a move many times, his rational mind prevailed, and he finally restrained himself. Chapter 105. There were a total of 17 couples, 34 people. The church didn't differentiate them. Instead, they moved them all into the sacrificial array in front of the statue. Under the effect of the lost soul water, the 34 people lost their minds. They were muddle-headed and their bodies were heavy. The members of the church only used the magic fairy when suppressing the resistance. After that, they were quickly recalled. Now they were moving them by manpower. 16 members of the church. It wasn't slow for each person to move 2 people. They still paired the couples with their backs against each other, and the backs of their heads close together. After all the couples were settled, they finally breathed a sigh of relief. Mr. Haishing said with satisfaction, "Everything is ready. Next, we just have to wait for the bell to ring." Then, the members of the church knelt down in front of the statue and prayed silently. Outside the temple. Website. https://m. Vipcanchu. VIP Dake cautiously poked his head out. A total of 16 members of the church were facing the statue and praying seriously. Looking in from the outside, only their backs could be seen. Maybe this is an opportunity. If I use the evil fluctuation, maybe I can take them all down in an instant? Dake's mind was spinning with thoughts, but he still denied himself in the end. The Bliss series of magic cards would cause the power of the statue to flow backward. Using it here would be suicidal. And if he was careless, any member of the church would react. As a first-year student, it would be difficult for him to get any benefits. The most threatening one should be Haixing, who was obviously the central figure of the church. In fact, the best way to deal with such a situation would be to inform the professor. Since Professor Kazair was unwilling to take action for some unknown reason, then he would find other professors. But there didn't seem to be enough time. The members of the church looked like they were about to make a move. By the time they called the professors, everything would be over. In the end, what were they trying to do? Resurrect the goddess? If they were so devout, why didn't they go to the school of mysticism? And how could the so-called goddess be resurrected so easily? Dake couldn't understand. The members of the church were behaving strangely. It's already 11:50 at night. Could they be waiting for 12 o'clock, the last moment of the holy night? The moment when Halloween comes? What should I do? What can I do? Dake retracted his head and leaned against the wall, thinking quickly. What did the book say? Encountering such a situation, you have to measure your own advantages first. Think about what you have. What can it do? Think of a way out before you do it. Slowly, Dake had an idea. He gradually calmed down, and the trace of panic in his eyes quickly disappeared. He became calm again. Before this, he had never thought that his psychological quality had improved to such an extent. Whether it was in his previous life or in this life, he was not a person who could think calmly under a dangerous situation. But now he seemed to be able to separate his emotions and think objectively. There was no use being timid. Anger only had the opposite effect. He was like a child who had suddenly barged into a slaughterhouse. He was about to snatch the butcher's knife from his master's hands. Time trickled by. At first, the members of the church prayed silently, but gradually they started praying loudly. What came out of their mouths were words and prayers that had never been heard before. Clear and fast, sacred and beautiful. Everyone's prayers seemed to be different. It was like every instrument group in a symphony. Every group had its own rhythm, but when combined, they formed an extreme melody. The prayers of the members of the church became a sacred song. One by one, the incantations became tangible and danced around the statue. They were white, black, and gold incantations, mixed with a charming pink. Wisps of fog gradually rose. It was the light pink fog that seeped out of the statue. The fog gradually spread and accumulated at the bottom of the temple. Dake poked his head out again and couldn't help but hold his breath. From his perspective, he could clearly see. The members of the church who were kneeling in front of the statue had a large amount of fog crawling up their bodies. The parts that danced like snakes drilled into their ears, nose, mouth, and even every orifice of their bodies. Then it drilled out again. It was like they were being baptized by the goddess. But it was more like they were being brainwashed by the goddess. Dake's eyebrows twitched. He found that the fog had spread to the 34 couples. It was like carefully probing. First, it drew out a little bit. It went in from the left ear, and out from the right ear. It connected a man and a woman. Some people had a reaction. Some people didn't have a reaction. The fog threw away the people who didn't have a reaction, and wrapped around the people who had a reaction. It was 7 pairs of generals, a total of 14 people. The fog increased its strength. Traces of transparent liquid substance were brought out by the fog that shuttled between the ears. It formed a bubble-like accumulation of liquid beside the people's ears. This made Dake involuntarily think of the antique shop on Traveler's Street. The scene where old John used the iron hook of fate to hook his distracting thoughts out of his mind. And the liquid substance that was being drawn out by the fog seemed to be similar? Because his understanding was limited, Dake could only guess. As more and more liquid substances were being drawn out, the liquid substance that belonged to each man and woman attracted each other. They were like bubbles in the water, floating up to the top of the head little by little, and merging in the middle of each couple, forming a big bubble. The surface of the bubbles was uneven, like reliefs on the wall. The deeds of people rose and fell in them, like a merry-go-round. In a small temple that had been silent for countless years, 2 rows of torches burned on the wall, and the flames flickered. The pure white and sacred statue emitted a soft halo. The pink fog was gradually filling the air. 16 believers wearing marine leather clothes were praying devoutly. A beautiful melody echoed in the temple. Above the people who were sacrificed, 7 transparent bubbles that were getting bigger and bigger rolled in the air. In a direction that Dake couldn't see, the faces of the 7 couples showed happy expressions. Suddenly, in the complicated magic circle with the statue as the center, dozens of red candles lit up without warning. The flames were thin to thick. The oil of the candles dripped down the candles. The ceiling of the temple reflected the light of the candles like a mirror. Circle after circle of fire flickered in it. The light suddenly shone, like the ripples on the surface of a water droplet, spreading out in all directions. The entire ceiling flickered with a layer of silver light. Then, the ceiling disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by the clear night sky and the bright moon. The statue of the goddess opened its eyes the moment the moonlight shone. Chapter 106. She was born from the moon and descended upon the earth. She was both the goddess of the moon and the mother of the earth. She specialized in the reproduction of all things, and was not stingy with the grace of the earth. She was the most beautiful goddess, the ruler of the night. Her beauty was eternal. She was sacred and noble, in charge of fertility, reproduction, and love. Kazair closed the book and closed his eyes. The flower card engraved with memories lay on the top right corner of the table. Strands of green light were drawn out, weaving into green roses. At the top of the spiral clock tower in the center of the castle, remember the website, VIP can't you? VIP Professor Didi Makesiway floated in the air, gently flapping her wings like a butterfly. The wrinkles on her forehead were as deep as knife carvings, and 2 incomplete moons were reflected in her eyes. 3 more minutes. She lowered her head and looked around the castle. When the clock struck 12, all the ghosts and monsters would disappear. Panduola summoned the final boss, Bichimos. There were only 3 minutes left. Principal Erdii and the others had already arrived at the banquet hall on the first floor, waiting for the clock to strike 12. The students would pour into the hall one after another, starting the second half of the masquerade ball. Eldest Princess Elisha sat beside the principal, chuckling and chatting about daily life. Professor Thompson and Professor Cheong-si were talking, while Professor Li was sprawled on the table like a salted fish. Inside the secret chamber of the temple, Dake, who was peeping into the temple, was uncontrollably attracted to the statue of the goddess. He raised his eyelids and saw the whole process of the statue opening and closing her eyes. Their gazes collided at the first moment. At that moment, the mist that shrouded her eyes suddenly dispersed, revealing a pair of eyes that were as gentle as water. In just an instant, they became evil and ferocious. The delicate face as white as jade also became as ferocious and terrifying as an evil spirit in an instant. Dake was frightened and quickly retracted his gaze. But when he regained his senses and looked again, whether it was the eyes or the face, they were still holy and dignified as if they had never changed. But the quiet and beautiful ceremony under the moonlight had already lost its color. The hourglass of time flowed backwards. Dake's gaze pierced through the ceiling and saw the night sky outside the castle. Even though it looked like a mirror, the moonlight shone through the mirror into the temple hidden in the secret passage of the castle. The light shone on the statue of the goddess, reflecting a bright white light. Occasionally, when he looked up, he could see a white dragon dancing in the sky. And the legendary monster, Bichimos, the lord of the beasts. There were only 2 minutes left. Dake walked out from behind the wall. The change in that instant just now. Instead, he made up his mind. The little devil beast flew beside him. A light pink magic card appeared between Dake's 2 fingers. Bliss. 92. There was still plenty of time. The pink fog was like a spider web, binding the 16 pious praying members of the Marine Industry Order. The 34 people who were captured as living sacrifices were injected with the soulless water. They would lose consciousness for a short period of time. At the same time, the bond between the soul and the body would become loose. Their thinking matter would become unstable, and it would be easier for them to be separated from the brain. Humans injected with the soulless water were the perfect seedbed for the devil's parasitism. In the era when the devil race still existed, the soulless water was the most commonly used drug when the devil race conducted experiments on living beings. But this drug was completely banned at the beginning of the new era. Unknowingly, in this area, it seemed that Dake was the only one who could still move. He walked into the temple and slightly closed the distance between him and the statue. As far as he could see, 7 spheres formed by liquid substances were rolling violently. The closer he got, the clearer he could see the past reflected in the transparent water spheres. It was the whole process of 7 couples from knowing each other, to knowing each other, and to falling in love. If a person could find true love in his life, it would be very precious. They were all rare treasures. Dake had thought of poking them, but he didn't do it in the end. How much longer? It should be soon. His eyes glanced at the night sky above the mirror. The moonlight tonight was beautiful. 1 more minute. Hiss. Among the 34 living sacrifices, there was a strange movement. To Dake's surprise, a girl with short black hair wearing a vampire countess suit stood up like a marionette under the influence of the pink mist. The girl's eyes were still clear, but they were filled with fear. She didn't seem to be affected by the soulless water like the others. It was even possible that she was deliberately captured and was waiting for an opportunity to act. However, the magic card that she regarded as a treasure betrayed her at the most critical moment. The pink mist released from the magic card stuck to her body like spider silk. At this time, it controlled her limbs and pounced on the night prince wearing a black crow mask who had appeared in the temple out of nowhere. Roar. She wanted to speak, but the only thing that came out of her throat was a beast-like roar. She knew that she was pouncing on the person who was most likely to be her savior. But she could only watch as she tore him into pieces. Whoa! The vampire girl suddenly let out a scream. The merciless blow from the Prince of the Dark Night shattered her fantasy. Then he hit her with his knee from below. Bang! After all, he had received training from the Valkyrie very short. No matter how weak Dake was, he wasn't someone that a weak girl could easily get close to. He didn't even summon the magic fairy and got rid of the poor girl who was controlled by the pink mist. He kicked the girl who had completely lost her ability to move to the side. Dake's eyes became more and more serious. He even used this method. It seems that the time is almost up. Then he raised his head and saw the head of a giant beast with 2 curved horns flying across the mirror. The pure white bride riding on the slender white dragon sped past under the moonlight. Dong. The clock struck 12. In an instant, the moonlight above the castle suddenly shrank. The area that lost the moonlight was swallowed by the night. Only the Shungmalian castle reflected white light like a huge lantern. The students felt the condensed moonlight and thought it was a Halloween surprise. The unimaginably strong moonlight penetrated the mirror and shone directly on the statue of the goddess. At this moment, Dake felt something in his body become restless. His emotions fluctuated uncontrollably. It was like looking at the full moon at a very close distance in astronomy class. But it was stronger than that. In his 2 fingers, Bliss Eye was trembling crazily. The Bliss 3 in the card bag was about to jump out. The statue's eyes suddenly turned to him, and its face became ferocious and distorted again. But it was more like sarcasm. Blue veins popped out on Dake's forehead, and he felt that he was about to lose control of his anger. He immediately activated Bliss Eye and used this, Bliss Eye, as a medium to communicate with Bliss in the statue's body. As expected, bliss flowed into his body like water. Dake stared at the statue's expression. He found that the statue's expression did indeed twitch. Magic summoning. At this moment, Dake endured the bliss, pouring in and activated Bliss Eye with a normal summoning spell. He tried to guide the bliss that poured into the little devil beast. The first time he encountered this, he used the bad idea of destroying the magic card because he was too panicked. But this time he came prepared. It was better to guide according to the situation than to block it. After all, the statue was just a statue. The bliss that flowed out of its body, through Bliss Eye, as a medium, flowed into the little devil beast's body. At the same time, The statue bathed in the strong moonlight was also crazily absorbing the essence of the moon. She suddenly opened her mouth. The liquid balls produced by the 7 couples were suddenly sucked up by her. Holy night, worship, sacrifice. The ritual was still in progress. The power of longing, the power of bliss, the power of moonlight. There was also some kind of original power that remained in the statue itself. These various powers were constantly fusing and fermenting in the statue's body. A corner of the fog that had long been buried in the dust of history was revealed. The old ruler leaked a trace of aura from his eternal slumber. The entire Shangmalian castle was shaken. Principal Aertii, who was waiting in the banquet hall, suddenly slammed the table and stood up. Anna and Enchi, who were still running around in the castle corridor, were instantly surrounded by the light circle released by the fairies. They were forcibly brought to Principal Aertii's side. Professor Shi Erfu, Professor Thompson, Professor Cheong-si. Almost all the Shangmalian professors showed a solemn expression. Only Professor Lili raised his head to take a look, then curled his lips and lay down. Pan Duola, who had successfully killed the final boss, Bichimos, at the last second, suddenly lowered her head and looked somewhere in the castle. The white dragon that was connected to her heart let out a long dragon roar. Professor Ka Zaire packed up his books, stood up, and walked out of the office step by step. Inside the temple, Dake held Bliss' eye high and continuously guided the power of the goddess to the little fiend. Under the infusion of a huge amount of power, the little fiend's forehead shone with a strong light, and the emblem of the great sin, clearer and brighter than before, appeared. A steady stream of power was absorbed by the emblem of the great sin. With the emblem as the core, the little fiend's entire body began to turn into light, and finally formed a huge luminous body. Its life structure had undergone an earth-shattering change. The little fiend in the form of a bat gradually transformed into a black cat that hugged its knees like a baby and curled up into a ball. A trace of excitement flashed in Dake's eyes. His original purpose was to absorb the energy in the statue at the most critical moment, so that it would suffer a backlash during the ritual. But now, it seemed that the situation was developing in an unpredictable direction. Good. Bad? He couldn't predict. But the evolution of the little fiend hadn't stopped. In the huge luminous body, the black cat that was curled up into a ball stretched its limbs under the infusion of a steady stream of energy, and its entire body was rapidly transforming into the form of a human female. It was the noble and powerful fallen angel, the embodiment of sex appeal and beauty, and the extremely flirtatious digital beast, Demonis. Heartsuit, thank you for your subscriptions, tickets, and followings. Heartsuit. Chapter 107. Crack. Bliss, I couldn't bear the burden, and cracks appeared. The demonic female beast in the light gradually opened her eyes. They were scarlet red, like blood, but there was a seductive aura flowing in her eyes. As the incarnation of evil born from the convergence of high-purity dark energy, the demonic female beast's personality was very arrogant and easily angered. The cloth on her left shoulder had its own will and could even speak human language, but it would remain silent in front of others. Her wing-like black cloak, although broken, could carry her to fly at high speed. Her left claw was huge and dangerous, and it could be transformed into a spear to pierce through the enemy. Information about the demonic female beast flashed through Dake's mind. 1 second to remember. https://m. VIP, can't you? VIP. Although his understanding of digital beasts was actually very limited, the demonic female beast, as a superhuman digital beast in the original work, left a deep impression on him. However, the demonic female beast in front of him gave him a slightly different feeling from his impression. Arrogant and irritable? No, there was no such thing. There was only charm and seductiveness. As Bliss' eye shattered into pieces, the transmission and transfer of power came to an abrupt end. The demonic female beast shook her arms and landed lightly on the ground. Her body was soft, her waist was slender, and her toes touched the ground silently. The seductive aura in her eyes gradually faded, but she was still so gentle as if water was dripping out. At first, Dake was worried that the demonic female beast would be out of control like the Heidi Road beast. But he soon realized that this worry was completely unnecessary. because the demonic female beast was indeed out of control. Just like the Heidi Road beast. After the initial confusion, the demonic female beast smelled the scent of her master. She suddenly turned around, and then bloomed a flower-like smile. Her eyes were full of the appearance of her master. She was about to hug him. Dake hurriedly reached out to block, but he happened to block where he shouldn't have blocked. Instead, the demonic female beast stuck to him even harder, her eyes filled with a dense, seductive fog that couldn't be dispersed. Just by being so close, the fragrance emitted from her body was already irresistible. Dake hurriedly retracted his hand, his face slightly red. That was because he was anxious. In the end, humanoid digibeasts and beast-shaped digibeasts could not be lumped together. Facing the Black Dirk beast and Moon Ivan, no matter how clingy they were, Dake was able to calm his heart and not have any evil thoughts. But if the target was a demonic female beast, he quickly took out his branch card, preparing to use it as a life-saving measure at a critical moment. Fortunately, as a complete digital beast, the demoness beast's control over the energy in its body far surpassed that of a mature Heidi Road beast. In fact, she wasn't completely bewitched by the power of bliss. In essence, it was still a little demon beast. Thus, when she saw the school card, the demoness beast immediately stopped her predatory behavior. She only slightly opened her rosy lips and lightly licked the corner of her mouth with the tip of her tongue. "Master, are you willing to go to Mount Wu with me?" However, as soon as she said those words, Dark saw through her true nature. Thus, Dake regained his composure. "Little fiend, can you restrain it?" The demonic woman beast narrowed her eyes and felt it for a moment. Then she opened her eyes and said, "It's different from when I evolved into a Black Dirk beast. There are some other substances in it that prevent me from sinking. It must be the moonlight." Dake raised his head and looked at the ceiling. The strong moonlight seemed to be inexhaustible. It was still madly pouring in from the mirror formed by the ceiling, and the statue of the goddess was bathed in the moonlight. Even though more than half of bliss had been extracted, there were no more cracks on its body. The moonlight was pure. It should have been incompatible with the power of the great sin, but it was the opposite. They got along very well. Dake suddenly rubbed his eyes. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the statue of the goddess on the altar seemed to have shrunk a little. No, it's not an illusion. It has indeed become smaller, and the speed of its shrinking is accelerating. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Dake said in surprise, "Don't tell me that the so-called resurrection is really just to bring the statue to life? Shrinking to the size of a human, and then coming back to life." This was too different from the resurrection goddess Dake imagined. He didn't know how to ridicule it for a moment. But the demonic woman beast suddenly said, "Master, give me the mission." Dake was slightly stunned. Then he realized that he didn't see it as clearly as the little demon beast. No matter how the statue of the goddess was resurrected, now that things had developed to this point, both sides were irreconcilable. There was no other way. So he immediately said, "Destroy it, demonic woman beast." The demonic woman beast smiled charmingly. "Since it's master's mission, then I'll respectfully accept it." Before she finished speaking, she had already spread out her wing-like tattered cloak and flew in front of the statue of the goddess. Dark wave. The moment she raised her arms, countless bat-like dark matter was suddenly released. But the statue of the goddess instantly lit up with white light. It actually destroyed all the dark matter. The demonic woman beast's expression suddenly turned cold. The sharp claws on her left hand turned into a dark spear. With a fierce force, she pierced through the white light, and then directly stabbed at the statue. Crack! The statue had no more tricks up its sleeves. The dark spear pierced a black hole in the statue, but the statue's face became more and more resentful. The demonic woman beast licked the corner of her mouth. There was a trace of strange excitement in her eyes. She raised her left hand again. The dark spear pierced out like rain. The statue did not resist at all, and was pierced with countless holes. Those holes were close to each other, and finally, after the last puncture, they all collapsed, forming a huge hole that almost cut the statue in half. Through the huge hole, one could only see the endless darkness inside the statue that was like an abyss that could not be looked at directly. Blasphemer. The dignified statue finally let out a scream. Without the divine power filter, that voice was like the sound of glass shards rubbing against each other. It was hoarse and ear-piercing. I'm a demon. The demonic woman beast laughed wildly and released the dark wave again. Immediately, countless bat-like dark matter condensed and pounced on every corner of the statue like moths to a flame. The outer shell of the statue could not withstand the erosion of the bats at all. In the blink of an eye, it was nibbled away. When all the bats suddenly scattered, the statue of the goddess on the altar had already turned into a pitch-black object with only the outline of a human body. It was also at this moment that pitch-black object suddenly counterattacked. When the demonic woman beast was caught off guard, it completely covered her body, forming a huge, wriggling black block. The strong moonlight shining down from the mirror was still shining on that black block under the effect of the ritual. The ritual was still in progress. Dake, who was holding the school card, suddenly changed his expression. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.